Hello, everybody. We made it. Damian just was able to join the stream about 10 seconds ago. So
I'm not saying anything because I have nothing good to say.
Yeah. No, I get it. We're learning. If that was not the theme of last week, when Fowler all two could not figure out how to join the stream. So
you think sharing a link would be easy, wouldn't you? But no, we still muck it up every week.
Well, you asked me where I sent it, and it was 2 messages above where you asked where I sent it.
In my defense, I wrote that in that chat on my phone after getting out of the haircut. I don't read it. I just saw that there was a thing from you and David. I'm like, okay, I better tell them that I'm not going to be there. And then I sit down and click the link in the invite. So that
makes sense. That checks out. Yeah. Nice haircut. You looked so spiffy for AspiriFriday.
Thank you. I let it go a week longer this time, and it was really bugging me this last week. So I'm very happy to get it back to Shortville.
That's
fresh cuts.
Yeah. Welcome everybody. Nice to see you again. We're back for a second week. We weren't kicked off of YouTube after our first AspiriFriday last week, where we did Bitwarden via the Bitwarden people in the chat helping us and a lot of screaming. We're doing our first ever guest this week. So I'm Maddy. I have Damian in that corner. And then we have Superior David below. We have Pine instead of Fowler.
Superior? Oh, no, definitely not. I mean, I don't hold a candle to Fowler. I'm just a talking head.
I will say you probably will bring a level of calm that I think is needed.
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. Fowler's...
We'll get that out of you. Don't worry. It won't last.
I started noticing that in some of the messages with Maddy and Fowler. It's like, oh!
Yeah, the use your words all caps has been my go-to this week.
That should be your next shirt.
Yep. So yeah. But yeah, so Fowler's at an offsite or something, business, corporate, important today, and so he did tell us he was going to be watching on his phone, like in the back row with his AirPods. So at some point he's going to come into the chat and start yelling at us. Just everybody keep calm. But we have a guest. A real world guest who we did not prime for this at all. I sent him a gist on GitHub like 3 days ago, and I was like, see you Friday. And it is this side. Sean, nice to meet you. Nice to see you.
Hey, everybody. Great to be here. Really excited to be working with Aspire. And you're right. This is brand new. One of the things I was saying that I'm excited about is that, this is an actual introduction. I have heard about .NET Aspire. I have read the odd article about it, but I've kind of had to keep it at arm's length. And so I am jumping in for the first time. I haven't seen code samples. I haven't done this. And we have our actual production code base today that we're going to go through and hopefully add some Aspire magic to it. So I'm very excited to learn a bunch today.
That's so exciting. Like, what could go wrong?
Exactly. Live experiments, improv. Like, let's do this. I called it developer improv earlier in the chat.
Yeah, I like that.
That's how I'm thinking about it.
What Sean was nice enough to do was send me a bunch of info about the app, which I promptly then said, cool, I'm going to ignore that because if I read about it, I'm going to know too much going.
Understood.
And I notably did not share it with Damian or Pine because I was like, they will read it and then we'll be way too prepared. Can't have that. But that's good because I think afterwards I can try and like crisp that up and maybe use it as a summary because we're not going to post the source for this. This is a production code base, so we're not going to post the source after, although we're going to share the screen and show source and everything. So yeah, there's a live share link, Damian. We tried to set it up beforehand this time, but my Visual Studio is updating still. So, we'll get there. Before we go into screen sharing, Sean, tell us a little bit about like what you do and your app and why you think Aspire might be good.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Sean Killeen. I'm with SCT Software, and so we work primarily with customers who are in the SAP space. So we facilitate like shipping and logistics support for customers in the SAP space. So the app that we're going to be talking about today is an application called our Carrier Integration Platform. The way it works is basically we have a product. Our flagship product is called XPS. So that product sits in a customer's SAP system, and it helps them move, helps them ship things, helps them rate packages, helps them understand which carriers, FedEx, UPS, are going to have the best rates, right? It helps facilitate that end-to-end experience with the carrier. And there's not a lot out there for SAP that actually does that. So we've been able to kind of move things forward for our customers a lot. But that XPS, the way it has classically worked, is that we had code embedded in an SAP system that would talk directly to your FedEx or to UPS. And that gets tedious because whenever UPS or FedEx updates something, we have to submit a release, and getting a release of software, which is the ABAP language, into SAP systems for customers is burdensome. For us, for them, like no one likes it. Customers have to maintain certificates for all the carriers. They have to maintain firewall holes for all the carriers. No one wants that. No one's got time for that, right? And so what we did is we built this this tool called the Carrier Integration Platform, which we essentially can think about as middleware, right? We have a standard request. It goes to our Carrier Integration Platform. We take our configuration and the credentials and the secrets and all of that stuff, format the message for the carrier, get the send the shipping request or whatever to FedEx or UPS, standardize the response, return it back. So from an application perspective, it's fairly simple, right? The power ends up being in all the integrations and all the complexity that we can handle for the customer. So that's a fairly new offering. It's on the SAP BTP cloud. So the way it works is it's all .NET 9 containers running in Kubernetes on what SAP is called their SAP BTP Kaima cloud. So it's basically managed Kubernetes that lives within the SAP BTP cloud. And so in order to facilitate that, we've got a bunch of stuff that we do with it. So it parses and works with PDFs. So we have an Iron PDF container that we work with. We of course have logging. So right now we've got Seek for logging, SEQ for logging. We've got, of course, Prometheus for metrics. We've got some Grafana dashboards that we work with. And our story of kind of where Aspire starts to come in is, for the longest time, actually when we first heard about Aspire, I said no, because we were in the process of trying to set up our Kaima environment, our Kubernetes, and I wanted our environments to mirror each other. I wanted our local dev environment to mirror the Kubernetes environment so that we could kind of make sure things were going to work right, kind of get a one-to-one. But now we're at a spot where it's a little bit high ceremony to spin stuff up. I mean, I've got a bunch of containers that's got to spin up. I got a Docker Compose file. Then we've got to hit F5, right, and get the application running and build that. And so one of the things I'm excited about is kind of reducing that inner dev loop. Now that our rest of our infrastructure is feeling pretty solid, this feels like a great way to kind of make a lot of that stuff less overhead, both in terms of how much it runs and in terms of just the amount of effort any developer on the team has to do in order to spin stuff up. And so we're happy. This is, I think, an opportunity for Aspire. Everyone said, hey, it would be great if we got it, but then we kind of had some other priorities, and then this came up, and I was like, well, now this is an opportunity we can't pass up. Like, let's do it. We'll do it live. And
do it live.
We'll do it live, and we'll
do it in prod, baby.
We'll make it work. So I'm so excited about that. I'm happy to go through like the individual containers or whatever, but that's the background.
Yeah.
I think that's really amazing, because you're literally setting us up for, I think, something pretty special. Like, that's all the things you just said. I mean, I'm not trying to jinx it, but like, just all the stuff he's saying. It's like, all right, perfect. This is great. Yeah.
So that's where we are, and I think in terms of other background, I think we might have all we need to jump in and get started. I'm happy to start by going through the Docker file that we have for our app, or going.
I feel too informed already, Sean. Like, this is not the vibe. We need to go in blind. Like,
okay, I'm gonna ask one question before we start. If you had to explain Aspire in not a 5-minute paragraph, how would you explain it, Sean?
Well, it's
what do you think it is? There's no wrong answer.
In less than 5 paragraphs. But let's say, if I had to explain it, I would say that Aspire is, and based on what I've heard so far, I would say that Aspire is a tool to reduce the complexity of container orchestration within your developer loop, and to bridge the gap between that and your cloud deployment scenario.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's going to be our new tagline. Holy cow, that's pretty well.
That was actually pretty good.
Awesome. Well, this is recorded. Good, I can replay it.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, my favorite thing is to ask people that and just watch them be like, Docker Compose?
Like I said, I'm here for the improv. Throw stuff at me. It's not going to, I can't guarantee it's going to be good, but I'll give you something back.
Nice. I love it. All right, I'm going to put your screen up. You ready?
Let's do it.
Woo.
All right, well, I've got here, this is just our background on our application here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll pull up Visual Studio to get started here. And let's go ahead and, so I've just got our secrets here. By the way, there's nothing secret in our secrets. I've verified that already. We're all good. No, we're all good there. And I've got Zoom It. Damian, I told David as well, I've got Zoom It available. So if we need me to zoom in on something, I can easily do that. But I've got, so in terms of our Docker file, it might actually be best if I do this in VS Code real quick, just to pull it up. I like the experience of looking at the Docker file a little bit more in VS Code. So let's do that. So this is the Docker file for our application itself. It's a fairly straightforward application. However, there are some things we do where we have individual carrier DLLs that we're building. And so we kind of have a little bit of a departure, I think, from the exact standard structure. And so I tell, we'll look at this in the CS Proj in a minute, but we tell Visual Studio to kind of not be as helpful with Docker file builds as it normally is, because it was skipping some steps a long time ago. Maybe it doesn't now, but it was skipping some steps that kind of that we needed, and we were finding the files weren't showing up. But bottom line is, we've got our base container here. We've got our build container. Let me zoom in on this a little bit more.
Yeah, I was gonna say if we could zoom in on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, we go. So we've got we copy our build props. We've got our CS project itself that we copy. We've got another project that we copy here, and then a common project as well. So that's just to kind of speed up the restore piece. Also, I should mention, I'm open to feedback on any of this at any time, because there's probably I mean, the last time I touched this was a while ago, and so there's probably things that have evolved. So there's everything's fair game here. We'll be focusing on Aspire, but if you see something that's off, I'm open.
Listen, if it works.
Yeah, there we go. So then we copy the CS Proj files for all of the individual carriers that we work with, and this is so that we can perform that restore step and cache it ahead of time. So then we go ahead and we run our NuGet restore. We run, we go to the API, we build the CS Proj file for our API project. We go ahead and publish it, and then our final container, we've got that publishes it there. So I think, generally speaking, probably pretty standard, except for some of those one-off project copying and the restoration and the way that we're doing that. So that's the entirety of the Docker file.
This is the one you run during your dev inner loop, right?
Correct. This is the one that we run during our dev inner loop.
So
this
just
is
curious, like, why do you manually copy over projects instead of just using the solution, out of interest? Because this is like very error prone, right? Like if you copy one of those projects into a path that is not the same relative path that the actual project you're building uses, none of this would work. So,
I believe it was a significant speed improvement at the time, because when we copied the project folders themselves, we could do a restore that took less time. There definitely was a time trial that we did a before and after on, and came out ahead on it. But like I said, that's one of those things where I'm actually probably game for reviewing that.
We think about different things as framework and tool engineers and like designers. So like, if these things aren't changing very often or at all, it's likely not a big deal. But when this adds another place, obviously, that someone who adds a new project to the solution or adds a new project dependency to your main project now would have to know to go and update this as well, because none of this is actually automated based on the source of truth, which is that CS Proj, right?
You're absolutely right. And in our case, we've essentially been pretty lucky that most of the stuff has remained static. But I think that your point is still very valid.
Okay. So you typically F5 in VS or whatever, and you run this file, like you literally dev using this. Wow, I would get very impatient very quickly.
So and sometimes we do. It's not too bad. It's not too bad, but sometimes we do.
A big difference about Aspire that we should highlight then right off the bat is we don't do this. Like, we do not run your projects in containers in Aspire. In fact, we don't really have a great story for doing that. We don't have any super duper integration for that. Like, you can add a Docker file. So you can absolutely just add this Docker file to Aspire, and we will build it. But then you lose any of the integration that Visual Studio is doing or VS Code with regards to attaching debuggers and stuff. Like, we do not have a first class, I want to run my .NET projects in containers while using Aspire. That is just not something we have. It's on the backlog to do.
Well, this has been a great stream, and I've appreciated meeting with you guys. I'm
exactly.
Well, so it does.
No, this will be interesting though.
But the only thing that doesn't, the main thing that doesn't work right now, if you do that, is that the .NET developer certificate doesn't recognize Docker as a localhost type.
That's one of many things. That's
one of many things, but that
won't work. Yeah.
But that's the thing that bites me the most. Because for me, the magic of Aspire is the dashboard, right? And so like the dashboard just not working is a huge pain off the bat.
Yeah, like so the telemetry, because as you pointed out, there's a bunch of reasons why that becomes problematic. So the VS WSL and VS container tools do a bunch of manual things to make things like the cert work. They do a bunch of manual things to hook up the debugger. Right. So when you hit F5 in Visual Studio and you select a Docker file as your launch profile, that's part of the Visual Studio tools for Docker. a bunch of other stuff happens behind the scenes, which Sean alluded to, and that stuff does some stuff a certain way by default, which is optimized for speed, not accuracy. And so what Sean was talking about, where we found it did some things that it wasn't quite what we wanted, you can actually turn a bunch of those things off in the VS Docker tools. So you can set MS build properties that will disable certain things.
Right here.
But then it's slower, right? Like for example, it doesn't actually build in Docker by default. When you use VS Docker tools for .NET, it still builds on the host and then it copies the output into the Docker container.
The comment that literally says, this flag says, please just do what the Docker file says.
That's really,
So there you go, right? So that's been turned off here, right? Because that's what they want. They want to use the Docker file to do all this sort of stuff.
Well, how does that differ than like the SDK build for like containers? Like when you have a
SDK doesn't support building containers, it supports publishing containers. And that's a key distinction, right? So publish is not part of the dev inner loop workflow. You can't launch with a publish. Like it's just not a thing. So today, and again, this is a thing that's been requested of the SDK container build. It's called SDK container build, but it doesn't actually happen on build. So we actually have said that we didn't want to add support to Aspire for running your projects under containers until the SDK supports building the container as part of build, so that we don't have to do it. And rather we keep all that source of truth about what does it mean to produce a Docker image from a CS proj.
That seems reasonable. That seems that's probably how I would prefer it, even though it means that we might be waiting a little longer and having to finagle some stuff here. But I think that makes sense to me. And
it's trade-offs, like all the things you talked about, Sean, like what this enables you. We know a lot of people who like to run their stuff in Docker containers and build in Docker containers as part of their inner loop. There's trade-offs involved. Like you need more dependencies are required. There's a performance hit. You need to think very carefully about caching and layering and all this type of stuff. So otherwise, you did more of a performance hit. Some things aren't full fidelity in terms of what you might be used to experiencing in a typical F5 development scenario. Some things aren't exactly the same. But the counter side of that is it much more closely matches what is running when you're not on your Windows box. So if you do have anything that's like OS specific, then and you want an F5 under that, then you kind of have no other choice other than to do this or in WSL, right? Which we also don't support in Aspire yet. But we made a choice in Aspire up front to target the dependencies running containers typically, or in emulators or whatever, and your .NET projects run as normal. And that way you get the same kind of experience whether you .NET run it, Aspire run it, VS Code launch it, or VS launch it, and we don't have to maintain like 4 different sets of things. But we will get there. Like I think there will definitely be, once the SDK gets that support, we'll definitely circle back and go, right, what does it mean now to hook up this all the way through in Aspire? What will be interesting is that folks like yourself who are using the current VS experience, there are some differences. Like the way that VS does the Docker integration is very likely going to be quite different to the way it would end up working with the SDK-based approach. And it may be that the differences are subtle enough that it doesn't matter, but it might be that some of them, especially because you're using a custom Docker file and like doing a bunch of stuff quite manually, it'll be interesting to see whether you hit any wrinkles. And if we hit the wrinkle and we need to go around and try to reconfigure some stuff, I mean, this can take twists and turns. Even if this just ends up being an example for other folks, and even if not merging it in, I'm still happy to explore. So my recommendation would be that we do this the Aspire idiomatic way, which would be that the .NET projects are just going to run as if they not in containers, because we just don't have support for doing that well. And we go from there. So it'll be interesting to see what your dependencies are. I don't think we've seen yet kind of what your dependencies are.
We'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at that next, I think. And so just one thing to note that I know is important to us is in terms of, we have certain folders that are being mounted for caching for Iron PDF, for doing certain other things. So that'll be interesting to kind of, wrestle with that or grapple with that as we go through.
Interesting.
And then I think, and this is actually probably a simpler version. We have another project as well called Extract that uses Akka.net and some other things and has to do some other stuff for that sake. And so I think that this will probably still represents probably our best chance to move it forward. So let's take a look at the Docker Compose here. So For the Docker Compose, we have a couple of things that we're running here. So we've got the Iron PDF engine because our application, as we mentioned, is going through it. It sometimes needs to get labels back from carriers, needs to split them, needs to convert HTML or ZPL to PDF, has to do some things like that. So for that, we're using Iron PDF. We've got Seek for logging. We've got the Open Telemetry Collector for metrics. We've got Redis for caching. We've got Redis Insight just for our own ease of use. We've got Prometheus here for metrics, and we have Grafana. Now, this is kind of one thing to note is that as part of this, I'm willing to simplify. One of the things that we had was we wanted to mirror that, like it must be Prometheus, it must be Grafana, because that's what we're running in our in our production environment. I realized over the last 6 months we really haven't done things like an inner dev loop here on Grafana. Typically, if we make a choice, we're doing that in our dev development, we're exporting it, we're adding it to source control, we're deploying it. So it's not really, the inner loop here isn't as prevalent as we thought it would be. And so, I'm definitely, I know that Aspire has the dashboard. I know that it's got kind of its own take on the logging and the metrics. And so I'm open and interested to working with that and kind of lopping off Prometheus and Grafana from this as well.
That makes sense. My immediate thought would be, optimize around the stuff that Aspire does by default. But then, we have samples that show how to use Grafana and Prometheus as well. And Aspire supports launch profiles. So you could absolutely have a launch profile for your app host project, which is the Aspire orchestration project, that says, I want to run with closer to production mode. I want Prometheus and Grafana. And then you have to manually select that. And then the code that we would write would say, only if I'm in that launch profile, do I want to add Grafana and Prometheus? And that way you can kind of get the best of both worlds. You can run them when you really want to, and then just rely on the Aspire stuff when you.
That sounds ideal.
Yeah,
that's
we can do all that type of stuff. That's not a problem.
All right, let's do it.
All right, let's just jump in then. Right click, add Aspire, pick a project.
All right, let's do it. So,
how many different projects do you have?
Let's see. So we've got a project for each carrier, and that's part of what's getting built in the Docker file there. We're building them, building that and copying those and running it. But I think the main project here is the CIP API project. That's what's referencing those carrier projects at this point. And then what we're doing is we're using I'm going to be terrible and forget the.
That's fine.
Are those other projects just class libraries?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Are those other projects just class libraries, or are they services?
They are class libraries.
Oh, good, great.
Yeah,
so we don't have to worry about that.
Just class libraries. Yeah.
All right, so you really only have one app, really.
Yes. In this case, we're looking at basically one web API app.
Love it. Easy. So what Maddy said then. Maddy, do you want to?
Yeah, right click add. Right. Go to the API project, right click, and add Aspire orchestration. .NET Aspire orchestrator support.
All right.
That's plenty of words.
So all right. So we the project name prefix can just stay the default, or is it going to?
You can call that whatever you want. That's obviously pretty whatever standard you folks use in your solution. You can make that as short as long as you want.
This default seems reasonable.
Okay. Sweet.
All right.
So it's going to add 2 projects.
Yep. Sweet.
Okay, I see the app host project there and the service defaults.
All right, let's go into program CS and make the project run. There you go.
Adding
Did
it add them where you wanted them to be added though?
Okay, so what we didn't do was we didn't bother to look at the project to see what code patterns and APIs they're using. So this is one of the reasons why I think Fowler did it the way he did it last week, is because this golden path, if you click a thing and add it, only works if you're already using all the modern stuff. In the sense that you need to be using web application, you need to be, you can't use startup classes, because the tooling in Visual Studio tries to automate adding code, and it does that by introspecting on your code.
Okay.
And if the introspection fails because you're not calling in the APIs we expect, then this fails like it did here. So
let's check it out then. Let's see what the heck. Let's see what old stuff we've got.
In your program.
I see controllers.
That's fine. That we don't care about that.
Yeah.
Understood. Yeah, it's not minimal. For sure.
Okay,
so we've got the logger, we've got web application builder.
Okay, can you show me the create web application builder method?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Let's check that out.
Okay.
So we've got
this is good.
Head secrets, environments, configuring.
The pattern's different though. So what I'm thinking has happened is at the point where it tries to find your code to add the lines of code, because you have structured this differently to our templates. It goes, I can't find it. It kind of does a best effort. It looks around using Roslyn, but it doesn't do a deep analysis to try, because frankly, some patterns are basically impossible to detect. Like there's so many permutations. So this is fine. We can manually add the code required.
I feel so bespoke now. This is
to do the hookup.
So
No, this is like not atypical, right? This is kind of normal.
No,
Like,
what matters is it added it to the app host. What it didn't do is add the service defaults package project.
it did add the service
methods.
defaults project. It's not added the code. What failed
Right.
was adding the lines of code. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's not you, Sean. It's us.
Does it make sense to then just kind of back out of this change and start over after making some
No,
modifications?
it didn't actually invalidate the whole thing.
Okay.
That process that you went through does a number of things. We saw it create 2 projects in the solution.
Right.
Then in the app host project, it added a project reference. So if you open the CS proj for the app host, you'll see that inside there, you can just double click on that. You don't need to say edit project.
That is true. That's such an old habit.
I was just gonna say, double click. Yeah.
You can tell someone.
I have a legacy project that I'm working on that I just upgraded from .NET 4.5 to .NET 4.8.
There you go.
So I'm also steeped in the legacy world as well.
So if you scroll down a bit to the project and the item groups after line 40, you'll see there's a project reference to your CIP API. So they did that part. That's good. And then if we go to that CS proj itself, so go back to your app and look at its project file, you should see a reference to the service defaults project would have got added somewhere down in here.
There we are.
Yeah,
so
there
it
you
added that. So it did. It actually did all the the structural stuff happened, like
project
creating projects and linking them. So we just need, and then it added the code in your app host project. If you go to the program or the app host.cl, I don't know. Oh, the other thing we didn't do, Maddy?
Let's see.
These templates are out of
what
date.
version of the Aspire templates were installed before we
It's
invoked
9.0. I
Yeah,
noticed that
so
when you open the project file. So we're going to update some Aspire. It's very easy. Go
Okay.
back to the Aspire app host project file.
That's true because I installed the latest version of the CLI, but not necessarily.
Yeah, it doesn't handle your version yet. Yep.
All right.
One
So where am I heading to?
The Aspire app host program CS.
Okay.
Which you can rename to App Host CS if you want to make
rename it
fine
to
angry
AppHost
and make your
CS.
life easier.
It's
That
just
is
much easier.
Indeed, I will do that. That's way easier.
Nice. Very good. Very good. Sorry, fine.
Oh no, you're fine. I'm just laughing out loud here. It's fine.
So in the project file, like in the CS proj for that.
We're in VS, Maddy, so let's use NuGet.
But you can't do it for the SDK anyways.
Doesn't matter. Let's just show people because we got feedback that we didn't show people how to.
Okay.
How this
First, right here, line 3, change that to 9.3. That's the SDK, which is separate than NuGet packages. Now, if you do your NuGet for the solution, Damian, you want to walk through that?
Just do it through just do it on the project. Like, let's not complicate looking at all the packages for the whole solution. So I would just manage NuGet packages for that one project.
The app host.
Yeah, for the app host project, and then look for updates. And we should see that there's update to 9.3.
There we have it. Let's go ahead and update it. Sure, I accept your license. I'm being bold. I'm accepting your licenses without reading them all like I normally do.
No, you read it.
Normally, I read them cover to cover. But
I bet you do. Okay.
Okay.
So we can close that then. That's fine. This is good. And so we can see the line of code that did get added. Line 3, it did add that code. So it adds hey, we need to add your project to the distributed application model, the app host model. This is how you describe your whole thing. And so in theory, just this should be enough that if you were to try and launch this now, you should see the dashboard. It should build everything. You should see the dashboard, but your app won't work because all the dependencies aren't there yet.
Right, of course, right.
It's good to take this incremental approach to see what works at what point.
I built instead of just running. Let me go ahead and run it.
Yeah.
Oh, this is where it's going to look brutally. There we go. All right.
Nice.
So no build failures. That's a good start. We added stuff and we didn't break anything yet. In terms of
building it on my machine too because I'm in the live share.
No, yeah, I'm seeing the terminal as well.
I'm going to go ahead and
join the live share. I need to do
that.
Yeah,
I know.
I'm going to go ahead and get rid of
it's in the chat, Damian.
Okay.
So we can see here then I've got my local host application here. Now, one of the things that so I'm not I do see the dashboard over here on my other live monitor there. So we've got the dashboard running, which is great.
Nice.
So I see the dashboard, see all
Didn't give it an endpoint.
all the places there. And so is it worthwhile at this point to try to see if the API itself that's running can receive a request like via Postman?
So our first thing I would do is show the console logs for your project in here. So go back to the dashboard.
The first failure is right here. There we go.
Oh, perfect. If you hit a breakpoint because you attached the debugger. Yep. Okay. So just let it go.
Yep. And I will say this will be interesting too, because I don't remember the last time we've run this outside of that Docker file. And so
like, how does it fail when it doesn't have all of its
There's probably some other configuration. I'm sure there's some other stuff we'll have to get creative about, but it'll be fun.
So let's go back to the dashboard.
Sure.
And by the way, I don't see the live share link in the chat because I think it was shared before I joined and it's not there.
Oh,
there's a people tab. Oh,
I will.
I'll Teams it to you. Oh, there
now it showed up again. It just got shared again. So now it's shared. All right. And now it says it's finished. So it actually crashed on start. It looks like.
Well, it crashed when you hit that breakpoint.
Well, it depends on where that's happening, right?
Sure.
Within the startup path are not, but I'm going to guess it must be. You must have the code that we stopped on was in the startup path of the app. And so
yes,
let's look at the console logs on the dashboard. We can
that's
see.
right.
That's
so
right.
David's on the right track. So let's go choose the resource. There's only one. So there's a bug. All right, here's a user experience issue right now. Someone log it. If there's only one resource, don't maybe select it. If I go to console, resource, right?
I think I posted that like a year ago. Maybe.
Okay, we should get that fixed.
I'll go tag it.
And so if you
not terrible as far as UX goes.
Okay, so here's the console logs from that application, and we're only going to get console logs because we haven't hooked up OTel yet. That's what service defaults do. So we can see that this is why it crashed, right? This is what we saw, right? It was trying to.
And that makes sense because what we actually do is because we just see a reference here to the SAP Credential Store. What we actually do is the SAP Credential Store at runtime in our Kaima instance has a binding that shows up as a Kubernetes secret. So what we do here in our local is we basically fake that, and we have configuration values that we put in to perfect. And so we should be able to make that work.
Perfect. Okay.
Absolutely.
Well,
that's cool.
Do you know off the top of your head, like you could give us some advice on which way we should go here then? Yep. Should we perhaps, if we start trying to resolve this specific issue, will this app get further? Like, should we be able to get to the point that the app kind of boots and stays up before we add dependencies?
It should be, because I think that's really the only critical path resource that we really have to have that binding in order to operate.
So let's do that. Let's do that then. Let's talk about how we can get those secrets mocked, as you kind of put it, for local
and we have
using Aspire.
And I think we had there is in our, I want to say it's either in our CS proj or in configuration here. Let me check our app settings.json and see what we're doing here, because there was in our I'm gonna go back the other direction here for a moment and stop this, because I think that if I go to our CIP API project and go back to our Docker profile here, I believe, in fact, it might be easier to do it in VS Code if I'm remembering correctly, which I may not be. Launch settings. So in our prior launch settings for our Docker-based project, we have CIP is local set to true. So I'm going to go ahead and mimic that.
Yep.
And then, so that may be what we need there. I'm just going to double check and see if there's anything else while I'm here. I think that is mostly it.
Okay.
And we just the seek endpoints, I don't think that's going to cause a problem, and that's all we've got there. So hopefully this will be fairly straightforward. Let's see if we can do it.
Yeah. So then go back to the app host.
Yep. Well, let me go to. Oh, you want to do it in the? There's
a couple of ways we could do it. So what should be happening right now is, because you have multiple launch profiles on this project, and none of them match the name of the launch profiles in the app host project, then it should pick the first launch profile that isn't IS Express. That's what it should be doing.
Yeah, it looks like it's there.
Okay. Well, no, that's the app host launch profile, because you've set the app host as the startup. So then what happens is the app host boots up. It sees that you've added a project, and then it needs to find the launch profile for that project when it starts that project. Yeah. It looks by default for a launch profile with the same name as that you launched the app host with. So in this case, HBS, but you don't have one of those. So what you'll probably want to do, so then it should fall back to using the first launch profile that it finds for that one, which is not the Docker one that has the setting, and we probably don't want to use. It
would be correct. It would fall back to the CIP API,
and that doesn't have that setting that you I think you just showed us.
Correct.
So we could just add that setting to that launch profile, unless that's a massive violation, or we can do what I think David was going to suggest. We can just punch that value straight into the environment variables of the app in the app host.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Let's
So
assume
the
that-
fact that there was no URL, like Maddy said, there's no endpoint, suggests to me that we're hitting the same issue that we hit on stream last week, which I'm still super surprised by. We need to follow up on this, Maddy. It seems like it's not finding any launch profile. Like it is literally just like not launching it with a launch profile. So what I would do is at the end of line 3, Sean.
Yep.
I would you're going to do some chaining calls at the end of the same line effectively. Yep. So you're going to say with launch profile and pass in the launch profile name.
Let's see. Did I spell it right? It is on the same line as.
I don't know. Why isn't it resolving?
Give that a hover.
Yeah.
Maybe go back and get your IntelliSense going and see. Did I just get the? Oh, you have to pass it in. Sorry, it's a constructor argument now. We changed.
Yeah.
It's a constructor.
So instead of
chaining the method, there'll be an argument that you pass in here, which is launch profile name or something like that.
There we go.
Yep. There we go.
Pass it in there. Yep.
That'll
Perfect.
do.
So let's just run it again now. And the thing that we should verify now is that you see a URL in the dashboard.
Gotcha. Okay. Oh, I ran the wrong one. Sorry.
That's all right.
Cancel that. Go back to the app host here.
Yeah.
Good catch.
We'll get it to the point where you never have to switch projects again. Switch startup.
Hey,
projects.
that's certainly lovely.
I'm filing the bug on the app host on the resources console login. Now I'm gonna have to go find the bug on the launch profiles.
Okay, so because it crashed, it's not going to show the active link, so that's fine. So let's do that property then, Sean. Let's add that missing property that's required in the launch.
All right, and you said you wanted to add it right in the app host,
it's really up to you. Like
for the purposes of this, I say let's just do it all here. So we've got
it. So after that call,
you're
going to do same line. This is going to be a big chained expression.
Okay,
it'll be with environment
variable.
Okay,
with environment. Sorry, yep.
With environment,
and put in the name, the config, whatever that config key was.
Let me remember what that was actually. Let me go find that here. That was CIP is local, true. Okay.
Yep, and then we'll just set that to true. You should be able to pass in a literal value, I think. I don't think it supports bool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
All right. So see what else we hit now. What's fun about this conversation is that normally you do these demos and I'm always geared to I hope everything works. And here I'm like, I know it's not going to work 100 times. I still have to get over that feeling of
So this is good. So now we've got a new exception, which is it looks like you're missing the Serilog URL, which you showed us before,
right?
Because it's not in config. It's failing to configure Serilog because it can't build the URI.
So
we can you can choose to either add the URI or change your code. I think we should just not change your code. Let's just get it working through the app host by.
We'll add an endpoint. Okay, so
And so, do you typically run Serilog as a dependency via Docker Compose, like Seek? Sorry.
Seek. Yeah, typically what we'll do is our process is typically Docker Compose up on the Docker Compose file that has Seek in it, and then we F5 into our application.
So let's add Seek to the app host.
To the app host.
Yeah.
Right. So before you call add project on line 4, we're going to add. So on line 4, we're going to do a different thing completely. Yeah, we're going to build.add container. Do we have a Seek integration? We probably do, don't we?
We do. It's in the main. I think Eric and I were talking about if we could get
delete that code, and then we'll Maddy drive him through adding an Aspire integration using VS's.
Using VS. I was going to go.
No. I'm saying we're in VS.
Yeah.
Let's use the VS features.
I'm sorry.
I'm not against the CLI, but we
that's fine. We'll mix it. We'll mix it up. It's a long time.
So if you right click on the project and add instead of adding NuGet packages, there should be add Aspire packages on the app host.
Add Aspire
.NET Aspire package. And so what you can see, this is filtering to things that are owned by Aspire, which means that they are.
It's not filtering to anything if I don't let it.
Right click again.
Let's try that.
So owned by Aspire means that we have blessed it enough that it's allowed to be in an Aspire namespace or the community toolkit Aspire namespace. Sure. Hosting means it goes in the app host. So that's all we're doing here to filter it. And then you can just pop after the magic string that does the filtering. You can do, that should pop right up. Yep.
There you go.
There we go.
Right.
Install that bad boy.
Yeah.
One day, Damian is going to ship the Roslyn analyzer he built that
Yeah.
sees you start typing it in the app host and pulls in the NuGet package for you. One day.
When I have nothing better to do for a week, I will dedicate 40 hours to getting that working.
And it's funny because I was suggesting that to Fowler, and Fowler's like, "Don't tell that to Damian."
So I suggested that before, like literally in the first slide deck. I was like, when we pitched this to management 2 years ago, I was like, yeah, we can build an editor experience to add these things from packages. And still haven't done it.
So at this
All right.
point, it looks like we've got the builder. We're adding Seek.
Yep. So you'll want to, and I have not used this integration. So I'm going to assume that it adds an endpoint and does everything it needs to do by default. So then the next thing you want to do is you'll need to assign that to a variable because we're going to have to extract information about it to inject it into the other one.
Is there a convention for that, or do we just call it
Whatever
Seek?
you like. What you're doing here is perfect. Yeah, I typically just use variable name matches the resource name that I passed in. Yep. So then down in where we're setting up CIP API, now you're going to want to have another with environment call, and we're going to inject in the endpoint details from that into whatever environment variable it's currently looking for. Yep. So exactly that.
Yep. We'll grab that.
And then this time you're going to pass in we can do it with an endpoint reference. So what you'll be able to do is do sec.getEndpoint.
All right.
Yep. And then you're going to pass in the name of the endpoint. And I'm going to guess it's just going to be HTTP. And if it's not, then we'll see it in the dashboard and then we'll come back and change the code.
All right.
Okay. So what that's doing is it's saying, hey, inject into that environment variable whatever the URL is for the endpoint that's named HTTP. Obviously, I hope that's fairly logical. But
this is making great sense so far.
I'm saying it out loud. Yeah. All right, so let's run it. Let's see what happens. Now, we just did add seek with no other things. So we didn't configure a volume. We didn't configure container lifecycle. So this will just start up a container every time and then shut it down every time.
And here we go. The app is running and seek is running.
All right, so that worked too good. That was
super.
Okay, that's pretty awesome.
So, and we have URLs now.
Yep.
Yeah, so your postman should be able to hit that URL now if that's what you use for your API testing.
So there's our local seek instance up and running. That's fantastic. All right, and then let's go ahead and I've got a different endpoint here. Just let me get the base URL to be different here. Helps if I share it on my screen. Oh no, it's correct.
Yeah. One thing you want to do at some point if you're all postman all the time, since Aspire dynamically assigns ports, you'll probably want to statically set one, which makes you lose some of the fun of Aspire. When someone clones it, if the same port is taken, right, there's going to be a conflict. But I don't think currently we have any integrations to make Postman automatically take the Aspire port. So something like Swagger that runs on the API itself, that would work because it runs.
Which port are you talking about?
In this case, no, I think it did work actually. So I mean, at least so it took the port there, and in our case, it's a stat. We have the control of the port anyways. We're statically defining it. So
so that's from the launch settings. We don't have the assigned ports.
That was actually me expecting it to not pick up on that, and then it did. So I've got the same Postman endpoint here. So it looks like okay, we're up and running. Let me go over to first. Let me hit an easy, well-known endpoint maybe. So let me go over to, I don't mind my 1,000 Postman collections from working with different carriers, but let's go to something easy real quick. Like that, we have a static file at well-known security.txt. So let's see, we've got that. Okay. Connected.
Okay, so it says, does it support TLS? Are you using the right?
Oh, that's a good question because in our container, we're sort of terminating that at the container. So I don't think this app is set up for that. So let me see if maybe that's be terrible for my local environment here and just try and see.
It'll be a different port.
Yeah, that's true. Will be. Let's see. We had 52727. All right. Let's try that.
Oh, wait. Okay. Hang on. You're passing in specific ports to ASP.NET Core to tell it what to. That's going to conflict with the URLs that you've got configured in application.
And that makes sense because that's been informing where it's sitting at in our Docker container typically. So let's
go back and I would suggest that the launch profile that you have that we're using, we kind of fix it to not be Dockerized. It looks like this CIP API launch profile is a bit of a combination of. It's not like a generic idiomatic default launch profile.
It is not correct.
Okay,
yeah, that's correct.
So we can either create a separate one. You can create one called Aspire if you like, and we can
let's modify this one.
We can edit this one. So
let's put.
Oh, that's the Docker one. We're not going to touch this one. That's fine.
Okay.
So maybe it is fine. Scroll back up to the other one.
See.
Yeah. Okay. So
Same difference.
we
Yeah.
don't
SSL
use
port.
those environment variables. So HTTP port and SSL port, we don't read those by default. Do you read those? Is that something that you're doing, or I don't know what those are actually.
Interesting. It's been so long since I've set this that I don't know that I could tell you. I'm sure it solves some problem that I had at some
point.
point.
I expect to see here is so on line 16 is application URL. It has the ports in it already. I don't expect them to be redefined as.
So then maybe that's just redundant.
Yeah, it could be.
It's the same in each string though, right? So.
Yeah, and I would like literally delete lines 17 to 20. I don't know what they do. They seem to be in the schema, but I don't know what they do. Okay, that should be fine. Right. So it'll actually be interesting then to figure out what we might do is do some tests from the browser just to figure out, is it still running? Did you stop it or is it still running?
It is still running, I believe.
Okay, if you go to that, just click on the URL like for your app.
What was that, sorry?
Click in the dashboard. There are 2 URLs for your app that are shown. Just click on the HTTPS URL so that we can see. Oh, it's not running now.
Yeah, F5 that bad.
All right, let's do it. Oh, there it is. Yep, it is not running. Yep. It helps that I don't lie to you, Damian.
Oh, that's all good. I should just look at the screen.
Okay.
All right. So let's just navigate like to your app, not to them. Yeah, that one. Yep. Let's just click on that. All right. So it says it's connection closed. So it says it's okay. Oh, this could be the same problem. Maddy. Let's go to the app host logs. Let's just verify it's not that first. They're in. So this is actually a problem.
Feature request.
So go to the terminal. So there was a console that was launched. There should be a console instance, or using integrated term. No.
Yeah. No. It popped up on my screen. So that's
terminal window. Yeah.
There it is.
There it is. Yep.
I want to make sure that there's no errors here. There aren't.
No errors.
So that's good, except it takes a minute for it to time out. So if there is a port conflict, we won't know because we'll take the segue to explain what's going on here. If you go back to the dashboard, by default, Aspire for everything that has endpoints, it actually spins up a TCP proxy in front of it. So port 44387 is not your app. It's actually right now a proxy.
Okay.
It's actually Envoy running in front of your app. And then your app is actually running at some random port that we injected into it. And you can see that. So if you click on the row to bring up the resource
detail. It just failed now, Damian. The fail came through.
Okay. And
then if we scroll on the right-hand side, see how we've set ASP.NET. If you scroll down to the environment variables, see that we've set ASP.NET Core HTTPS.
This is Sean's first time using the dashboard, by the way. Go easy on him. This is his first time using the dashboard. Oh, wait, you might have missed this. Sean has never used Aspire. So
I know.
Okay.
No, we're trucking along. No worries.
We're good.
I'll stop.
You're doing great.
You're
doing amazing.
I don't mind strong redirection. It works very well.
So you can see here that these are the environment variables that have been injected into the app, right, by Aspire. And we've actually set the ASP.NET Core URLs to a different URLs than what's in your launch profile. Those are ports that are randomly assigned every time that you launch, but we're taking the stable port from your launch profile and using that for the proxy in front. Okay. And we do that because having a proxy in front allows us to do certain features, right, that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do. And then we inject HTTPS port for the actual port, so ASP.NET Core knows where the end user is connecting to. So that it can do things like redirect to the HTTPS address instead of the HTTP address. But the fact that it's not working, if you go back to that console that you opened up, we're going to see there's a port conflict.
There we are, yeah.
And so that is curious. That means something on your machine is listening on...
Let's see here. Maybe perhaps there... Let me go ahead and shut things down.
It could be because you're running an instance of the app somewhere.
That's exactly what I'm going to check.
First thing I would check.
Yeah. So let's look, and I bet you I turned off our ncrunch test because that previously was spinning up test containers.
Oh, okay.
And it may be that I just left one, and sure enough.
Oh, look at that!
There we go. Perfect. You're not wrong. So let's go ahead. We've got that shut down.
Isn't it amazing? We've hit that issue in 2 consecutive streams. The first 2 streams. So we definitely have to fix that.
So at this point, I've got no containers running, nothing up my sleeve.
Perfect. Okay. So let's launch it again.
All right, let's try again.
So I mean, this is not anyone who's been a web developer for more than pick your time. has hit the conflict of ports problem, like locally, right? We all know that this happens occasionally.
Exactly.
The issue we have in Aspire is it's not very visible. Like we give you this dashboard, we say look here, and it's nowhere in the dashboard that's the problem. That's what we need to fix.
Sure.
All right. So now, if you click on that.
All right. So it's now
404. That's
now,
better.
Well, that is a 4. Yeah, much better. So let's see if we're going to go there to our well-known security.txt file, and there it is. So the app is running. It is there. It's able to receive requests. Well, I'm going to go one step farther and just see just how. Let me set my port.
And that's running under HTTPS. Yeah, it's functioning.
So let's make it go through the proxy from your other. From Postman.
One minute. I'll put the
so that there's stable URLs everywhere. Same port.
Yes. So the same port here, 44387. There we are. I've got our collection here. This just represents a local request that we make that represents a customer shipping with a certain carrier. So it's got some dummy data in there. I checked it just before we started, so I know that it works typically. So let's go ahead.
I'm going to predict this is going to fail because we're like
I would be amazed if it didn't fail.
Yeah.
I will be truly flabbergasted if it doesn't fail. So
this certainly looks like now that it's taking that long. It's either
it didn't fail. It worked.
Interesting.
What?
It worked. This is exactly the request. It went out. It made a request to the carrier for a rating. For a rate, it got back the rates for a package. It has gone through the entire life cycle.
Wow.
Okay. So
that's awesome.
That's awesome.
I have to ask some questions now. Then.
See you guys later. Bye.
When you say,
"Oh, great, shortest stream ever,"
we're done. So when you say it went out to a carrier, do you mean that the class library for the carrier that you're referencing?
Correct. So what I mean is that this has completed a request all the way through. Now to do that means a couple things have happened. It means that one, all of the carrier DLLs that we load up, that we make available to us are all there, right? So we found the appropriate carrier DLL for an interface. We initialized it. We gave it all of its dependencies that it needed. It went and called, for this carrier, which happens to be a carrier called Purelator Freight, went out to the Purelator Freight endpoint API. It took the request in, it translated it, it called the carrier, received the response from the carrier, translated that back to our common response and returned it to the end user, which is really everything this product does.
Okay, so then I guess the question.
So the rest is just gravy at this point.
What you mentioned Redis in the Docker Compose file.
Yep.
This didn't fail, so I'm assuming this doesn't use Redis, this particular flow.
In this case, if you saw there was a little bit of a pause.
Yes.
It's so in that case, what's happening is we have a local, let me just show you here, just so you got the full picture. In our secrets.json, we've got these bindings. These are the same things that are loaded. Of course, don't have to be a for development environment here, but these are loaded these are our bindings that are provided to us by SAP BTP Kyma. So we have a binding to the SAP Cred Store, and we have a binding to SAP's Cloud Identity Services. And so these are two things that our application uses. So what happened is the Redis cache wasn't available to pull those items from. So it used this binding, went out to the SAP Credential Store in order to retrieve those credentials, which are encrypted in transit and at rest, and then use this binding to decrypt them so that we have some code that does that. And so it followed all that through. And so really the Redis caching is there just to speed things up. And so I think we could add Redis caching and see it probably work now, which would be fantastic.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to check beforehand, because I'm fairly certain it's going to be right there, is that so we've got Seek, right? We've got Seek. Let's see what the logs showed, right? And there we are. So we've got Seek, we've got all of our stuff here. We can see, in fact, we can see exactly what happened. The cache get failed. We couldn't get there. And so we can see then it makes the request to I believe that might be this one here. Oh no, that's pull the carrier information. But it makes a request. It's somewhere in here buried to get to that endpoint. And then
it's the Redis timeout exception. Yep.
And so we can see everything that happens there. And here we have our debug turned on, just as I would expect. So I can see the request that came in. I can see the credentials that were found. I can see here the response that was returned, which is what we saw in Postman, because we returned those back to the customer's SAP system, in that case, for further processing. We don't want to store any shipment or PII information on our system. So yeah, this is working exactly as I would hope it did. If I needed to filter to the errors, I can do that. So far, this is shaping up really, really well.
So I'm thinking next thing, actually, let's get OTel working.
I was going to say service defaults first.
Let's do it.
So so we've got the service defaults project in there,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw that it was being referenced by your API project. So we just need to call a couple of methods from your program CS to hook up those defaults. So let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, you're not the app host CS, the program CS.
No, service defaults is for your actual apps. The service is meant to mean like a service is your like one of your apps. You're like in a multi-service architecture. You have end services, and these are the defaults that you share across those services. So what we're going to do is there's two methods that we want to call. One is where we set up the container, like adding services to the container. Overload the word services, unfortunately. And the other one is
classically overloaded term.
And one of them is to map the default endpoints. Now, Fowler, we're actually doing all right, but we'll hold that card until we need it. So let's go to the program.cs of your API app.
All right, I'm here.
And then, so on here, before you make your first call to configuring anything on the services container, so I guess that's line 149. Yep.
You would think that, but I may make some calls earlier, and it's been double.
Okay, I mean, it shouldn't be.
We're good. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just call builder.add service defaults. It should be in scope. Without yet, there you go.
And this.
And that one. So that's that. And then let's go to where you're calling map, where you set up your endpoints.
Is that? Let's see. Where am I?
There we go.
I've got the health checks map, but I hear you. Map controllers. There we are.
So after you can do this before the order of maps doesn't matter.
Okay.
But so wherever you want to put it, you can say or app.map default endpoints. There it is. Okay. And so what that's going to do now, this code is all in the service defaults project. So it's not magic. It's not like a library. Right. You can just F12 on that and go and look at what that.
Which I really like, by the way. I like that. That's a great. I'm so happy to see less magic.
Oh, good.
That's
good.
Great.
So I noticed you're already doing a bunch of things that we do in this. So there's a bit of duplication here, and that's fine. So like in what you would typically do at this point is you would look at what we're doing in our provided methods. You would look at what you're doing already, and you would just manually refactor the code to make sure it's doing the same effectively, right? Okay. What's interesting is I noticed you're already using OpenTelemetry, it looked like.
That's correct. So we're using the way we've got them in there. We've got the OpenTelemetry collector running in our Kubernetes environment, and so we're pushing the OTel out to the OpenTelemetry collector. That's pushing it along to Prometheus, and then we're sourcing our dashboards from Grafana.
What would be? We didn't look at the traces. It may be that they were already working.
Yeah,
because you are already adding OpenTelemetry, and the OpenTelemetry libraries for .NET honor the default standard spec environment variables for configuring the OTel egress endpoint, which Aspire sets by default. So
comment out those two lines. Should we comment out those two lines where we added service?
Yeah, well, let's try. We can that's a great suggestion, David. Let's just undo what we just did and then run it again and just verify that it is or isn't working already.
That would actually be very really cool if it just works.
Yeah, it would be kind of funny.
It should. It should. I just don't believe it will because I
didn't believe it would run last time though. And I'm optimistic now. Now you've got me hooked. All right, so some of those things out. I'm going to go ahead and because I'm going to be a good little coder here. I'm going to go ahead and create a branch. Nice. I'm going to create a branch and just get through the checkpoint here. Let's go ahead and create a branch. AspiriFridays.
So while you're doing that, I'm just going to make something very clear too for our viewers. So when the service defaults project was added, it's an actual project based on a template. It's not a NuGet package. So when we talk about there not being like magic, it's actual code that shows up that you get to then modify and make your own.
Right here.
Exactly.
Yep.
And the code in there by default really only does three things. It adds HTTP resiliency to HTTP Client Factory. So it basically adds retries for HTTP client calls. It sets up OTel, and it turns on instrumentation for ASP.NET Core and the runtime and a couple of other things by default. And it adds health checks. So it maps health check endpoints, and it creates like a couple of health check tags.
It also does service discovery wiring, right? To make sure that's
true. That's the other thing it does for HTTP Client. Yes, thank you. That's the fourth thing, is it hooks in the service discovery features. Yep.
Right. But yeah, it looks like you're already doing most of those things. So hopefully our stuff doesn't conflict.
We'll see. So I just completed the request successfully again, which is still blowing my mind that we're at that spot.
So I don't see any trace. Yeah, nothing's coming through.
See any traces here?
Yeah,
nothing.
It should have come through by now if it was going to work. Okay. So this could just be that I didn't look at your code and how you're setting up OpenTelemetry. You may be being a lot more specific.
Yeah.
I may be being much more specific than I need to be also. So that's part of it.
Yeah, because these libraries did evolve while we were building Aspire as part of building Aspire. And they now they honor more defaults. And so like, okay, it's like you're pulling out the endpoint, you're doing a whole bunch of stuff there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So let's see. So we're doing, so we're setting the current app version there. We are, when we're adding tracing here, we've got, the endpoint here.
Okay.
And so we've got, this is what it is. I bet you this might be, we're sending it all to Seek, and I bet you if I go in here, it might be there. Let's see. Let's see if it's there. Because that would be awesome as well. All right, so it is there.
Yeah.
So there's all of our traces and spam.
So that's fine. Like you've already done all the work to do this, and you're using Seek.
That's a good point. So we've got the metrics go elsewhere, but the traces go to Seek. That's right.
Right. So you could. Well, that's a good point. Like, where do you typically send metrics?
We are sending the metrics to OpenTelemetry. So that's if we see we're sending the traces to Seek, because Seek actually is fantastic way of integrating that. Okay. So in production, it makes it very easy for us.
Can you just scroll down a little bit for me so I can see
with metrics. There we are.
Endpoint is so you are. Hang on, go back up.
Okay.
So that OTel endpoint environment variable, or the OTel endpoint variable that you're setting the metrics
right here.
Yeah, what is that OTel endpoint? Where does that come from?
Let's go. Here we go. It's coming from configuration. So
so you're setting it manually. So you're not setting the one.
So this is a good. So there is a standard that makes sense, because I'm sure at the time I said let's just make it what I need it to be, and so I know explicitly where it is. But this is a great opportunity to refactor that to whatever the standard is. Not that
you can literally just delete this line and delete the line that sets it in the options. The options by default will look in environment variables, look for the standard name, and will set it. So you could literally just get rid of this line.
Let's do it.
Oh, you'll need to do the other line as well, where you're punching it into the options. Yeah. So just comment that other line out, and in theory,
All right.
So you could do the protocol as well, because obviously you set the environment variable that tells it it's gRPC, but it is gRPC, so it shouldn't hurt. But so if this works, you should be able to make some requests and then go to the metrics page on the dashboards and see metrics.
Let's go ahead and make a request or so. All right. So I finished here. Let's go see our metrics.
There you go.
And there they are.
So you've got metrics going through. Beautiful.
Fantastic.
That was easy.
Nice.
Wow. Okay.
So traces is interesting, because you've already got a trace solution that you use in your inner loop. As you know, you can't send it to two places. If you want to do fan out, you need to run a collector and then.
In this case, since we've got the capability of adding the logs, I think for simplicity's sake, we know we're using Seek in production, we know it works well, right? I think from a dev loop perspective, it makes sense probably to cut that out and simplify on the Aspire dashboard. And so I'd certainly, if I was, if we're really tackling this, I think that's probably what I would do, is just say, in this case, hey, I love Seek. We don't need it in this specific instance, right?
If it's developed,
you could use a launch profile.
Mm-hmm.
Right, correct.
You can make it selectable, so the default uses all the Aspire stuff, and then you can drop it down and say, no, I want to use Seek for this run.
So I'll say, I'll leave it to you. I feel like at this point, I feel confident that I could accomplish that given what we've done so far. So we can either demo that here if it's helpful for you, or we can move on to doing one of the other.
I think let's add Redis.
I was going to say, let's add Redis. And then if we have time, by the way, there are some nice test projects in here, Damian.
Sure.
I was clicking through.
We could refactor a test to use.
Oh, that's
really
terrifying.
good idea.
No, let's do it. So let's see. So let me see if I can. So if I'm going to go through this now, we've got Redis to add. So I'm going to right click on the app host there. I'm going to go to add .NET Aspire package. You got it. Right. I'm looking for Redis.
You're already a pro.
Is he really smart, or are we really good at our jobs?
Why not both?
It can be
Why
both.
not both?
Yeah.
Both. Yeah.
So all right. So we want, now there's a couple of choices here. So let's see. I'm not doing it on Azure, so that's fine. I don't think I need the community extensions. I'm not doing it on Dapper, so okay, easy enough. Hosting on Redis. Okay. All right, I've got that there. So now I'm there. Redis equals builder I'm assuming we're going to have to do some of the stuff we did before. We're removing my explicit, non-default values and doing that, which is fine.
Well, I would start out by just injecting it into whatever environment variable config key that you're looking for it today.
It's a good question, and I probably should check what that is. So let's find that. Okay. Oh, it helps if I'm looking at the right spot. Let's look at my actual app settings.
go.
Okay, so cache settings __. Okay, so we've got. I don't think I'm worried about Redis port because that's going to be the default, and I think we're running it on the default here, if I'm recalling correctly. All of this, I'm not concerned. I mean, this is just, of course, the local dev spot password, so I can get rid of that, or I'm not. We can figure out how to configure that. But
we can show you how to punch those values in. So by default, what we do with our Redis config is it actually all comes through as a connection string. Actually, no, Redis is a URI. No, it is a connection string.
It's a connection string.
Okay.
It's a connection string and it has a URI in it and some other stuff inside of it. So we're going to have to tease that apart, if I recall correctly,
I think
and
so.
punch it into each of the values that you have in your thing. I couldn't see the full.
Well, I can also refactor. Oh no, that's a good point. Probably less.
It's less impactful to do it this way first, and then you can always refactor it later on the other side. So what is the full? Is cache settings the root?
Yes, in this case, cache settings is the root. It'll be cache settings, double underscore.
Okay, Redis password. So we'll have to do.
The password's the only one we care about.
Well, you're going to have to do all of them.
But these are all the defaults.
That is true, but the host name will be wrong. So Redis server, Redis won't work. Like it has to be localhost, and we will inject that.
Okay.
Right? Because it's not.
So, which is interesting because I wonder if I'm. Oh, I see Redis server there.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, yep.
Oh, we'll set them both up here. Settings, Redis server.
And then similar to before, what we're going to do is this time we're going to use a callback rather than an expression. So there's an overload of these methods that takes a lambda instead. And then inside of that, you can close over that Redis variable that you declared and then inspect it to get things out of it, like get the connection string and then get specific properties. And then that lambda will be evaluated at the right time when your app is booting up to ensure that all that stuff exists, right? And so if you look at the IntelliSense for this, rather than passing a string in, we're going to pass a lambda in. I think it accepts a context, so you can just say like CTX goes to, and then create your little,
So it doesn't.
And then in here, if you do Redis dot, right. So I'm trying to remember how we do this for connection strings. Is there like a get connection string or a connection string property on Redis?
Let's see. With publish as connection string.
Do Redis.resource maybe.
Yep.
Do connection string.
Connection string expression. Get connection string async.
Connection string async. Yep. So then what you'll do, make this an async lambda and then do a wait. And that method, we'll figure it out. Like I haven't used this specific API, so I'm just figuring it out as we look at it. This one, if this might be the wrong one, we'll have a look. Because we want one that lets you say, get me we don't want the string. We actually want the specific bits. Like we don't want to have to manually parse the string, right? So does that overload take any arguments? Get connection string async.
Just a cancellation token.
Okay, so we that may not be the method that we want. We may actually want to be like to get specific things on resource. So I would stay on the resource. What else is
password parameter? Oh, primary endpoint. That's going to be Yep.
Perfect.
Because that's got the host, the port.
Yep.
Perfect. Yep. That's what we want.
Okay, great. Okay, so all right. So then we're going to say return.
It means we could actually do it the other way with an endpoint expression. That's fine. Like this way works as well. So then in the context, rather than returning in this version, in this overload, Sean, the context has the environment variables in it. I think, unless I told you to use the wrong one. What is in the context of this one?
Let's see if
you might be right. This might just be the one that you return. There's like multiple overloads with our environment. They all work slightly differently depending on what you're trying to do.
Gotcha. Sorry, so where am I heading next?
So you don't need this to be async because retrieving the endpoint is not async. So you can get rid of that part.
All right, makes sense. All right,
and then you do primary endpoint dot. That has the host and the so it has the host name and the port.
So at this point, am I just returning that?
I think in this one it is. So actually, does this one even take a context? It might be this one doesn't actually take an argument. This one just might be parameterless.
Yeah, the overload that you're referring to with the context has like an environment variables property that you can.
That's right.
Yeah,
you get access to everything in that one.
Gotcha. So we don't need it in this case though, because we've got at this point.
Well, there are multiple overloads that take callbacks. One of them doesn't take a context, but you still have to pass the name and return the value. So what you're doing here though will work though, specifically because well, okay, hang on. Primary just hover over primary endpoint. It should be type of endpoint reference, right? And then container host, hover over container host. That's a string. So that's the wrong thing. What we need to do is there's a method on primary endpoint that'll be like get. There should be a thing that gets you. No, it's not get. Go back again. There should be a way to get. Hang on.
Resource? There is a resource.
No, that will just take you back up to the resource.
URL?
You want to get property. So go down to property.
Oh.
Property. Okay.
Yep. And then you pass in, there'll be an enum that you pass in, endpoint property dot, and you want the host name, like that.
All right, host and port. Oh, I guess no, since it's separate. You want them.
It's because it's separate, correct.
Okay, host.
So what you're basically setting up here is a bit like a link query. It's a deferred operation.
What am I? All right, so what am I missing here?
And then I think, well, it's going to say, it's either going to be like an overload doesn't exist.
Yeah, so this overload specifically is expecting a string. So this is where you have to drop into the context.
Okay, so we'll bring that back. Okay, gotcha.
Back to the Lambda.
Yep. All right.
Is there not an overload, David, that takes us the environment variable name, but a parameterless action? One that doesn't take the context, and then you just return it. I thought there was.
I don't think there is. I could be wrong.
So see how it's underlining C. Can you just delete CTX, Sean, and change that to open close parenthesis?
Sure.
Yeah.
And then just try and return it.
And then you need a squiggle. You need a semicolon. Yeah,
that would help.
Yeah.
So here we're seeing. Still looking for still looking for a string.
There's two things being conflated here. If you use a callback, you don't need to use the deferred expression. You can just return the host. So you can go back to what you were doing before, primary endpoint dot whatever. So you don't have to call the property thing. The property thing is when you need to pass a deferred expression as an argument.
Okay, so this
which is basically gets used in place of a callback. You don't mix them together. You typically don't do a callback and a deferred expression.
Okay.
So if you do this way, you still need the callback. So host is a string.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah, host is a string.
So you can't do it this way because what's going to happen is the endpoint doesn't exist yet when you call this. So the host will throw an exception. David, you're muted.
Right, because you need to. You guys see, you need to await it before it's so spun up. I see.
Yeah, I was saying it's not allocated yet, right?
Yeah, it's not allocated yet, and so you'll actually get an exception saying the endpoint hasn't been allocated if you do it this way. So this part of the API.
Is it a question of just calling toString at the end of it? I mean,
no, it doesn't. It won't work. It's literally too early. Yeah. So that's why there's an overload that takes a callback, so that you can use the one that takes a callback with no parameters, and then put the same line of code in it that you were trying to pass directly. That one, then that will work.
There you go.
Yep, and do that, and then that should work. What's it saying now?
Simplify it to.
I use an inline. Okay,
nice and neat. Why not?
Yeah. So I'm surprised there isn't an overload that takes a reference expression for with environment. Like Pine, I don't know if you want to check that. Like I thought we tried that just now and it didn't seem to work. We have that for with reference. That absolutely does work.
Right.
But I really did think we had one for with environment too. So I'm a little surprised that it's not working. But this will work. Like this is fine.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do the same thing again for the password parameter.
Now so we're using whatever the default password is for the Redis instance.
No, we generate you a password. So what happens with these integrations is we generate you a random password and it gets saved in the user secrets of the app host. And so there will be password parameter. Yeah.
Yes.
And so that should be dot. There'll be a value on there.
Yep.
Okay. Dot value.
And
what's it saying?
What am I? In this case,
that's what you want. Yeah, it's is it null? Is it just nullable? Is that the problem?
Oh, yes. Yep. Nullable.
Oh yeah. Question mark.
Yep.
Just do question mark. Do the safe null traversal, whatever it's called.
The null coalescing here.
Or no, just the traversal.
Be able to put a question mark in there.
Does it not support returning a nullable string? Is that the problem? That can't be right, surely.
Let's see.
So you need to put the question mark after password parameter. So to say that, yes, I know that it could be null.
Yeah,
now it's a different error. Yeah. Okay. So now it's saying you can't set the value to null. So for whatever, I would just put an exclamation
just do that
point here at this point.
Yeah.
But that seems odd. Like I'm kind of surprised that we don't have that.
And the with environment that does accept an endpoint reference has a string as parameter too. So it probably expects like the name. I don't know if the endpoint has a name that.
Wait, that doesn't make sense. So it has 3 parameters?
Oh, wait, no. Yeah, I guess I'm wrong. Our API docs are fun to look at.
Okay, so I think this will work, but I would like to figure out how to do it using the expression, which is what I was expecting us to do here. But we should just try this, see what happens.
Now, that's true, and at this point, I guess we'll know if it's working. One, if the logs show that it's not, if the logs show that we're not hitting that error on the cache anymore. I was going to say, because I also have the Redis Insight there, but we don't need that in this case just to verify.
Well, you can. So we have Redis Insight support built into the integration. So if you want to,
of course,
on line 7, you can, before the semicolon, hit return and type dot with Redis Insight, and we'll give you a spin that container.
Well, that's awesome. Well, we can see here that we do have the Redis
so
support there. So
first thing to check before you do anything, just click on the row for your API app. On the row, not and then scroll down to the environment variables, and let's just look for the value that we set.
There we
go.
There we go.
That's good.
That looks good.
Yep.
So the thing that's missing is the port.
And
that's
true.
The default port anyway.
Yeah, but it's a good point. We might as well add that there.
Let's add it.
I think it's Redis port as well. Okay, Redis port. Yeah.
And let's add Redis Insight while we're here as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's go. Primary
endpoint port.
Host. Yeah, port. Yeah. All right. Don't worry about that.
And I think you need to 2-string it. I think that accepts it.
That
issue got logged a long time ago. Like, why do we not just 2-string the thing?
Is that for you? Yeah.
There was a reason.
And then we wanted to do with Redis Insight, right?
Yeah. So just delete the semicolon. Yep.
That's
with Redis Insight.
Fantastic.
That's it. That's all you're going to do. And then we'll do the work of hooking up Redis Insight and configuring it to that instance of Redis. So.
Yeah, that's wild.
I'm putting that on the website. Quote, yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, I mean that's fantastic. All right. So let's go ahead and run a request then here.
Yeah.
We'll run our little request. Got to let it finish its. All right, request is completed. Completed much faster. So let's go ahead and look at that seek endpoint for now, just to see. And we can see no errors about caching. So it definitely it added to the cache and it used it. And now I can likely call it. Now it still takes a little bit of time to talk to the carrier, but you see coming back much faster than it was previously. So
can you bring up the seek distributed trace view for that request? And I'm interested in whether your Redis client is instrumented.
Good question.
When you added it, because you're not using our Redis client wrapper that instruments it.
That's a good point, because I have our own specific instrumentation for getting it from the cache. So that I should zoom in a little bit. So that's me here getting criticality from cache, so we can see there that's happening there.
Good.
But yeah.
Okay. So we have what we've added so far are what we call hosting integrations. So that's the thing that's like spinning up Redis for you in the app host. We also have like a sister to those, which is called client integrations. And those are integrations that you put in your app itself. Those just wrap the standard packages that you're already using, like the client library packages. So you're using stackexchange.redis. We have an aspire.stackexchange.redis package. And if you add that instead of directly adding a reference to stackexchange.redis, and then we have methods that you call to set up those client libraries in DI, configure their logging, configure their distributed tracing and OTel support, and also their resiliency. If they have resiliency, we configure resiliency for you automatically, effectively with one call in the beginning. So
question about that. Question about that, because I'm interested in it, and certainly like that sounds fantastic from our local dev loop perspective. In our deployed Kubernetes environment, we don't have Aspire, and so what is the wrapper, the Aspire wrapper
Yep.
is that so we're just still picking up from all of the environment variables. It's operating
Exactly.
just as it is.
Exactly. So what we do is we do effectively invent a configuration schema. And so what happens is when you add that package, we actually also import in a JSON schema file that then augments the app settings IntelliSense. And so we basically build an Aspire configuration schema that says Aspire, Stack Exchange.Redis, blah, 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 blah. And then you can then set settings to do with how we configure the Redis client through configuration. And then that drives what we do. But of course, you can do it all in code as well. Right. So then when you run in production, if you want to change how the Redis client is being configured in production, you can just set environment variables in production or in application settings.production.json or whatever you want to do that uses that schema, and that will change how it gets set up.
Nice.
And so it's not magic. Like it literally is, we just have a very, very thin shim of code that knows how to read from configuration in those keys that we invented, that schema. And then when you call our method, takes those settings and uses that to configure the Redis client in DI. And that's it. And so then everywhere else in your app, you just consume your connection multiplexer instance or whatever it is that you're using from Stack Exchange.Redis the normal way from DI. And we take care of all the other stuff to do with that. Now, you don't have to use that at all, right? If you want to manually do it all, you can totally do that.
Sure. No, I think it's intriguing because again, this is all about just shrinking the stuff that we have to care about and know about in our local dev loop. So as long as it doesn't complicate the process of getting it to production, right? I like the idea of them not being diverging too much, but as long as it doesn't complicate things too much, then
right. So like in theory, it shouldn't diverge anything on the client side other than you need to be mindful of what are the configuration keys that are being read by Aspire to configure the client, right?
Which again, that's also a good indicator for us also to move back towards like the standard environment variable locations, right? So I mean, which is something that we're going to benefit from anyway. So I don't mind putting in some of the legwork on that.
And just like we've done with the hosting integration, if you don't want to change your app to use, the new environment variables, you can use our client integration and then just write code that reads from the ones you're already reading, and then push those values into our API to say, please set up the Redis client. Here are the properties using this value rather than the one that you're reading from configuration. So you still get full control over the whole left-hand, right-hand kind of thing. It's just that by default, we look in one location, but you can always change that and then still get all the benefit of the defaults that we set up.
And there's client integrations for like Redis or like the distributed cache with Redis or the output caching, like however you're using it.
Nice. So
and there's a seat one too. So
does that mean that does that mean that if I'm using the Aspire wrapper for Redis, for example, for Stack Exchange Redis, assuming that I've got that in place, does that mean that I'm getting then the additional telemetry that you talked about in production as well?
Yes.
Oh, that's really nice. That's okay. Yeah, that's great. You want to walk through doing that here? Because I'm kind of amped about that. Let's
do it.
we've got a good stopping spot here. So I'm just going to say, what did we just do? All of the things, Redis.
Well, and one thing we didn't really talk through either is like when you add Redis here, it's a container locally to your machine, right? That's running. So you can actually set up like the persistence or the lifetime, or you can tie volumes to it, and you can persist those, and you can really start leveraging all of that to like really mimic how you're running in production.
That's
very good point.
Yeah. So when you stop, basically like when you stop running the app host, we don't tear down Seek and Redis. They just stay alive.
If you write the code to do that.
Or you can tear them down, but keep the volume mount and whatever. Yeah. But it's super easy.
And does that just end up being kind of like a with volume?
Yep. You got it. Yep.
All right. Let's do it. I'm too excited not to do it. Yeah. All right. So
it would be with container
with data volume.
With data volume. Makes sense.
You don't have to pass anything. So that's actually a special method for Seek that knows how to configure the Seek container with a volume location. You can do it manually. You can call with volume and pass all the stuff in, but we just build you the higher level method for you.
Okay, that's really nice. Like I really like that's.
And then if you do with lifetime also, that keeps the actual container alive. The container.
Yeah, so then you can actually just keep the whole thing running in between sessions, so it'll be faster to start up.
Right. Some containers are a lot slower to start up. Yeah.
Seek and Redis are both fast, but when you get like SQL Server.
Or Iron PDF is a good example of that, actually.
Right.
Yeah,
One of the things that we, one of the things that we, in fact, I would love to do. Let's do that next before we do the wrapper,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I'm very interested in that, and I think that we would benefit from that. So, do we have an Iron PDF integration?
Not that I'm aware of.
I don't
so we
think
can
so.
build
We'll
one
check.
right now on the stream.
Let's do it.
Build one.
So
So,
let's
if I
have-
recall correctly, Fritz built one for AI purposes and contributed it back to Iron. But
Oh, really?
I know
It
he had a
was a
stream
while
where he was
ago.
talking about it. I didn't.
Interesting.
Yeah.
yeah,
Is it published? Do you know?
I think
One way to find out. Let's see.
Fritz Iron PDF. Yeah, Iron Software, Aspire AI. I don't know what shape it's in.
Well, I don't see a package for a.
I don't see a package either, but I
Yeah.
do see
Oh.
the
We
source
could
code
just
that
steal the
maybe
code
can-
though.
Yeah, exactly. But
Let's
we'll
do
start by
it.
hand, and we can use that if we get stuck.
Yeah. And I think, in our case too, I mean, really, I don't think there's, let me check the Docker Compose file. I don't think there's too much to it
Okay.
in terms of how we're using it, at least. So if we were looking at Iron PDF, especially for our local dev loop, like there's not too much. It is just
yeah.
a container
that's
with a
nothing.
version and a port. That's nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can do this
Do it.
without even writing a special
Yeah.
method.
Yeah,
We can
add
just
container,
raw
baby.
Call
Yep,
add container.
Yep.
Or not Redis. There we go. We'll do add container.
Add
Container.
container.
Now the first is the name, so it'll be
That's
Iron
right.
PDF, and then it's the container
Then
definition.
it's the image. Yep.
Okay.
And then if you
Iron.
want to change the tag, you can call after that with image tag.
Oh, okay.
And then you can specify which tag you want to use. With image tag.
yep.
Yep.
Okay, and then here's 20. We're using the. I just updated this, so I have to
Nice.
know which tag. we're
Nice.
using.
And then
All right.
by default, we're going to assign a random. There's going to be no endpoints. Like you have to tell it that this container listens on an endpoint.
Right, which is going to be port 3335.
Is it an HTTP endpoint or is it TCP? I'm assuming it's
TCP.
Oh, is it?
It's gRPC, and so I think it's
That's HTTP then.
so it should be HTTP. Yep, we're good.
So just call with HTTP
Okay.
endpoint.
P endpoint.
And then you
And,
can actually pass
now
nothing
we have-
and leave it all random, or you can
Oh,
tell it the port you wanted exposed.
That's a good
on.
point. Let's have it be random, because then let's pass that into our
All right.
application.
Now the thing we have to be careful of though is that the app running in the container probably is using a static port or looking at an environment variable to figure out what
Right here.
port.
Yep. So,
So
it's, so we got to set the environment variable from here, right? So
So pass it as a reference. Yeah.
yep. So we'll pass the service. So we'll do. All right. So it's Iron. Right file here. So we'll add another environment variable, right?
Yeah.
Can
Well,
we do
before we
with
do this
reference?
though, sorry,
Okay.
we've jumped a little bit ahead. You're on the exact
Okay.
right path.
Okay.
But actually getting the container to be exposing the service running inside of it in the right way, because we have that. There are now 3 ports in play with a container. You've got the
Okay.
port that the internal service is being hosted on. That's the target port. You've got the port that the container is mapping to the host, so it's exposed. And then you've got the Aspire proxy sitting in front of it. There are 3 ports.
Gotcha.
So your app, we just need to decide which ones have to be static. So typically with a container, the port that is being used inside the container by the code being run is either statically defined in that container, and you have to tell us what it is, or it's it reads from an environment variable. And that way, and then you can either change that code or you can set an environment variable on the container to say, hey, I want you to listen on this port. So I'm going to guess that
I'm gonna guess that it's static.
it's just a static port.
I think it's just static because we're not passing it in or telling it
so
anything
then
about
with,
that. So
with HTTP endpoint, you need to pass in a target port parameter and tell it the port that the internal service is actually listening on inside the container. Perfect. That should be all you have to do. Now, what will happen is Aspire will assign a random port to map from the host to the Docker container, and then another random port for the proxy. And then when we go and do the call that you're about to do, so we go back to line 22, you can do the same dance, and your app will get the proxy port, which maps to the host port, which maps to the inner port in the container.
all right, and so that at that point that's the
Yep.
so it's from here. It's again off the resource.
No, with you. So it'll be with the endpoint. You have to do with endpoint because this is actually an endpoint rather than. Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, not with
Yeah.
endpoint.
Would
Get
this be
endpoint.
simpler, a good example to
endpoint.
rip out and do the built-in service discovery? Because it's just the one.
Well, I was gonna say, I noticed we don't have with reference at
I was
all
gonna
yet,
say.
and that's like a nice.
So
thing to
that's a
show.
fair point.
This might be a good one because it's a lot less
Okay.
magic.
Yeah, let's try it then. Let's
So
talk about that.
so what I'm saying is, so we have a helper method, I guess, not really, but it's called with reference, and it passes the stuff, and it gives you anywhere that you're using our service defaults, you can reference things by just like the magic string. And so instead of with environment, if you do with reference iron PDF, so yeah, either comment out or nuke
Delete
it
the
all.
whole
No,
line.
all the way, whole line, delete the whole line.
Okay, gotcha.
Nuke 22. Oh wait, I'm in your live share. Hold on. Let me do this. Let me bully you here.
Sure, why not? Go for it.
Oh wait, it hasn't refreshed though.
Yeah.
It hasn't refreshed. How do I refresh live share?
Mine hasn't refreshed either. It's still
never mind.
stagnant. Yeah, I don't know.
That's fine. So yeah, so do a new line dot with reference.
Gotcha. Okay, I see.
Yep.
Okay.
And then just pass the actual object iron PDF.
Okay.
Yep.
So because it's not so the way this works is you can't pass a resource directly in unless it implements iResource with service discovery.
Right.
So now what you have to do is get an instance of the endpoint or the reference to the endpoint.
Right.
So ironpdf.getEndpoint.
Yep.
Okay.
And pass in HTTP as the name of the endpoint because by default the name of the endpoint is the scheme, and you called with HTTP endpoint didn't provide a name, so it'll just be called HTTP.
HTTP.
And that will inject some environment variables. So at this point, we could just run it, and then you can have a look at what environment variables we inject by default.
So there's one other element of this that I'm not sure we might need to do before we run it, and that is that our iron PDF requires a license key, and I've got one.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got
in the
one,
client
and
library or in the container?
So it is currently in our app secrets now, but it's iron PDF license key, so it's passed in as a, let's see, we've got it as an app secret here.
Okay, this is perfect. Let's add a parameter.
Parameters?
Yeah. So what we're going to do is go to the top of the app host, and we're going to specify that your application model requires a parameter, and you're going to mark it as a secret. So you're going to say var iron PDF key or something, or license key, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
The other thing is we're going to have to, that secret's going to have to be in the app host, not where
Which is fine.
Yeah, we're going
that's okay. Yeah, I'm all right with that.
And then you'll just call builder.add parameter. And just like anything else, after the line of...
you probably need the builder first. All right.
And then give it a name, whatever name all parameters have names.
Sure.
And then a second argument to this method, you're going to say is secret or secret equals true. That's it.
Okay.
And then that's it. So that declares a parameter, and then you're going to use that as what you inject in to your app. So scroll down to your app definition.
Sorry. I'm jumping ahead. Sorry.
No, that's all right. We'll set the value in a minute. Let's just get the model set up first.
Yep.
So scroll down to your application again, and whatever that, again, same deal with environment, like whatever location it wants that to be in.
Not annotation with environment, which was iron PDF license key. And let me double check that so I don't throw us off course. Iron PDF license key. Okay.
Perfect. Nice. And then pass in the parameter directly. I think you can just pass it directly.
Yeah,
you can.
Right. So now we have to set the value for that.
Right.
And we are going to improve this experience eventually. Right now, you just have to manually put this in the user secrets of the app host. So
I don't actually mind that because that's a standard enough pattern that you have a thing that's using.
And so look at line 3. You've got an example of what the pattern is. So we added one for you automatically when you added Redis.
Well, there we go. All right. So
and the API key for OTLP. So just copy that pattern.
Yep, I'll get that there, and we'll do parameters, and then does casing matter? No, it doesn't. Okay. Parameters.
So, and then the resource name, whatever you called it in the app model. Yep. Lovely.
I'm going to go ahead and double check that I actually called it that. Oh, help if I also.
JSON, baby.
Yeah, I know. I love it. All right.
That's right.
The quotes at the end are
messed up. You gotta fix that.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh yeah, look at the end of the string because there were like 4 quotes.
Sorry. Like when you paste into the JSON editor.
Yeah, no, it's screwed up. Thank you. Yep.
And then there you go. Perfect.
So helpful. I didn't escape anything else right now.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
There you go.
Okay, so we've got that. We've got now. I'll start it up. I've got to think of a.
So there's one thing we haven't done yet, but that's fine because I want us to run it first.
Well, for you, I will happily do. All right, let's see. Let's go back to our resources here. Let's see.
I'm discovering like a usability thing here too. Like notice how many tabs you have open. So like your typical flow is that you go and stop Visual Studio when you can actually stop you can stop the dashboard and it stops the app host.
It's supposed to close it though.
It's supposed to.
If you launch under the debugger in VS, it'll open a new browser instance, and then it will close it when you hit stop. That's what it's supposed to be doing. If you control F5, it does not.
I saw Stuart in the chat saying that we're streaming secrets. Don't worry, Stuart. I'm feeling bold.
We're super sneaky.
I'm pretty sure we'll be all right. But
all right, so I'm VFL to start. So let's have a look at its logs.
Yep.
So Damian will yell at you because there's a button next to the play button on the line of the resource.
Well, look at that.
Yeah.
Oh.
And we have no log.
Okay.
Ooh.
All right. So let's go to the app host logs and have a look.
So yeah, the terminal window.
Go to the terminal and just check if there's any that's shown up in the app host logs. That
there is. Let's see.
So Maddy,
found.
Were you saying you want the app host logs to show up here too?
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to do so. Well, in this case, that log should have shown up in the logs for the IMPDF resource.
Yeah,
because it's to do with that resource. At the moment, stuff that happens really early on starting containers doesn't get mapped that way. Right. So we're looking at fixing that.
Since if it's saying container not found, is that because it's taking IronPDF? IronPDF can take like 20 seconds to start.
No, it's saying it actually returned -1 when it tried to start it. So if you look at the full error message, it says that it returned none, but we don't have any logs, which is really frustrating that we got a -1 and it didn't even start. So if you go to Docker.
Yeah. Are we sure that the image name and tag was correct? Like
we should double
check. That's exactly what I'm going to check. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's start there. I'm going to assume it was me.
There. Yeah.
And so what's cool is like eventually if we were to turn this into a proper integration, we could pass things, we could add the license key and those kinds of things the same way we did with Redis, and it would all be kind of automagic there.
Yeah.
And we could probably do something maybe a little bit smarter with the default image and stuff, so this doesn't happen.
You need the repository name?
We do. That's what I'm missing right there.
Yeah.
Well, and this is a good point too, a good opportunity to share that the Aspire team is, a certain size, so they don't have the bandwidth to do all of these integrations, but there is a community toolkit that exists that you can contribute to, and Aaron would love to review your PRs.
So
I'm sure if we start getting into this, that you will be receiving PRs from us. So.
We should log an issue about that error message. Like you put the wrong name in, and it just said it exited with -1. Like what's that?
Yeah.
Like, that's
it did.
Great.
Now it did give us a little bit of a hint in that it said container not found, which
it did say that. Yeah.
Do we have the right?
I think though that message is really generic. If the container doesn't start for any reason, I think it says that, which isn't particularly useful for diagnosing why it didn't start.
Yeah.
But yeah, fair enough. Let's try again now.
And now we wanted to try. Do we want to add the lifetime to this first, or
if you want to?
Yeah, do that with lifetime.
You want to keep it running?
Yeah, because it takes like 20 seconds to start up.
Yeah, it takes a long time to start. And one of the things, and this will be interesting when we talk a little bit about tests, is that we do have tests that use test containers where it spins up IronPDF and is running and then turns it on. But if we had this loop, I would be fine to have it running this way and have it, I know we don't normally want to have the test make assumptions. I'd want to have the test started up, but there's probably some time.
There's trade-offs there, right?
Yeah, there's some trade-offs that are probably worth exploring.
Yeah, we don't have a fully fleshed out story on that yet with the testing stuff. Like by default today, when you use our test host,
persistent
containers are all set to non-persistent by default. Even if you set them to persistent, we change it because it's like, no, you want isolation when you're testing.
That seems like a reasonable default. Yeah,
assumption,
a reasonable assumption for sure.
We have a question in the chat, Damian, that's like related. What if my parameters are in HashiCorp or Key Vault, and you need to load those in the app host?
Yeah. So you can build a custom parameter, what's called a parameter default value, like provider thingy. You can write one. So the default one, as you saw here, the parameter default ends up getting read from configuration and stored in user secrets. Like that's what it does by default if it's a secret. You could write your own. It's not a particularly well fleshed out extensibility point right now, so I wouldn't be surprised if you hit some weirdness. The advantage of a parameter from a modeling point of view is that flows to deployment as well. So parameters not only are about hiding secrets in the inner loop, It's about saying if you were to run this through the Aspire publishing story, parameters require a value when you publish. The whole point of parameters are things that you have to set, like say, hey, it's an input. Think of it as an input to a process. When you're doing running locally, that input is configuration of the app host. It looks in the configuration, which obviously reads from user secrets by default. So that's why it works. If you don't have a value, the Aspire CLI, for example, we're working on having it prompt you for the value. So the first time you run it, if there's a parameter defined, it'll say, hey, I need a value for this. You could literally type it in, and then we would save it in your user secrets. Then when you deploy, it would ask you again. It would say, hey, I need a parameter for this. It doesn't use the one in user secrets, obviously. It says a parameter as a whole that has to be filled. And so that's kind of the advantage of modeling parameters. But you get to decide whether for a specific secret, whether you want it to be a parameter or just you have a resource that is a secret store and then you wire them up to your app. Like it's totally up to you how you want to do that. So,
Nice.
So we need to go into your app code now and change the endpoint that it's trying
can
to
we
resolve.
look at it, the dashboard first? Can we like inspect it
Oh,
all?
yes.
We already did.
Yep.
We already did while you were talking.
It's all good. It's there though. You can check it out. There we are. So we've got it. It's there. It's loaded. It's done everything it needs to do.
Okay.
That is actually fine, I believe. And
Yeah,
typical
video
of what we would see on
acceleration.
startup.
We can turn on video acceleration. There is you support setting Docker run args, so you can say, tell Docker, hey, I want you to enable the GPU.
That's great. I think I'm okay leaving off for now only because we don't have it in production either, and I'm okay with the one-to-one. But that's fantastic to know.
Okay, so the other thing I want to show before we flip back to code, go back to the resources page.
Sure.
Nope,
Oh,
back,
sorry.
yeah,
Back,
dashboard.
yep. Before we flip back to code.
And then in your app, click on the app to bring up its environment variables again.
Let's click on the graph though. We haven't shown that yet.
Oh, I mean, we should do
top
that.
next to table on the top there.
Underneath resources, click on that.
Oh man, that's great.
Click and drag them. Click and drag them.
You can zoom in.
That's some that's some Neo4j looking UI right there. That's nice.
Yeah, it is a bit.
Oh yeah.
All right.
So you can click on one of these. So click on your app here.
Yep.
And then look at the environment variables. You're going to find a new environment variable that got set all the way down the bottom. Starts with the license
services IronPDF.
There it is. So that's the URL. If you look at that, that's the URL.
Okay, so wow. Okay, cool.
So by default, that's where we put it. Now, what Maddy would like you to do is to change your app to use our service discovery library so that you can just refer to it by name. So we need to understand more about how you talk to IronPDF to figure out whether that's going to work or not.
So me too. I was actually looking to see how the heck are we doing that. So let me. So we've got our. It's been a while since we revisited this. So we've got a PDF processor that takes in a configuration.
Oh, it's all strongly typed.
Okay. And unfortunately, the way the IronPDF library works is also that I think it's if I'm recalling correctly, it's pretty global. It's like you have to it's like a singleton, I think.
So we wouldn't use service discovery for this because its config requires, it's more like a database. It wants a host connection, a port. Right. So
we can set but we have the IronPDF configuration that comes here for host port license keys. So we just set those environment variables.
Exactly right. Like whatever you are doing today to set those values through the environment, we're going to do the same pattern that we did for Redis.
So it's just IronPDF host, IronPDF port. Okay.
Yeah. And that would be cool for a client integration with that at some point.
Right. So you could write a client integration for that strongly typed client library for IronPDF, and then this would all be done automatically, right?
True.
And then before we run, remind me again, because I want to do parent-child, because Redis wasn't attached. Since we're doing with environment instead of...
It should find that, actually. It's supposed to. It's supposed to walk all references, not just like with reference calls, but anything where there's an expression that crosses two resources, it's supposed to resolve those.
So in this case,
connections.
In this case, because we don't have that primary endpoint variable, because we're not doing it's not the integration. We're kind of doing it on our own. Am I calling get endpoints here? Is that
no? It should still be you called with HTTP endpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep. So you just need to do.
Okay. Well, did I do that? Let me double check and make sure I did it. Yes. No. Oh, yes.
With HTTP endpoint.
So it has an endpoint called HTTP.
Okay. So
you should just be able to say.
In fact, it's right there. It's got the with reference there. So in this case, we're removing the with reference and we're just changing it to here, right? Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
So this is what I was trying to do the first time, but we ran into problems.
I was just trying to be fancy. My apologies.
Hey,
So this won't work because this will be evaluated immediately because you're trying to pass that in and the
Right.
endpoint's not allocated yet. So
Oh.
we need to wrap it in a delegate.
Okay.
2 parentheses and then an arrow right in front of it.
Yep.
That's right.
Change it to an error.
In line.
And then should we show wait for also?
We will. I was going to get to that once we got this working. I was going to. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Oops, let me see.
I'm still not sure why.
It makes you do an inline. The IntelliSense gets mad if it's not inline.
Yeah.
I was really surprised that we can't get the with environment with a reference expression working.
It is
there, right?
It's an endpoint reference. It's an endpoint reference.
That's fine. Oh, it's only an endpoint reference, not an. We don't have an overload that takes reference expression.
I didn't see one.
Oh, that's a bug. Like that, we should totally have one.
Does it not have port? What
Yeah,
what is the
let me
issue?
see. Yeah, hold on. What is it? It might be port number or something. Let's see. Target port. No. Oh,
that's port. It's port.
Oh, two string.
It needs to be 2 string.
Oh, yep. Yeah,
and this is why I'm surprised we don't have.
Well, reference expression. Yeah, that's there.
It is. So reference expression is there.
But it's not working.
Okay, so hang on. We haven't tried it for a little bit. We may have just got the combination wrong. So let's leave this line there. Just comment it out for a second.
Sure.
And then immediately after it, doesn't matter which one. Yep. So I want you to write the same opening. So all the way through to the end of the first parameter.
Yep.
You mean just another with environment? You mean?
Yep, that's right. Then second parameter, I want you to write inpdf.getEndpoint.property.
Okay. Do I have to specify the endpoint?
Yep, that's right.
Endpoint HTTP. Right.
Dot property.
Okay.
And then you're going to pass in the enum. It's an enum.
That's right. Property, and that's where it's property.
And then you're going to say host. Endpoint
property.
Yep. I saw it floating around in there. Thank you, IntelliSense. All right.
And then, is that working? It is working.
Looks correct. Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. That's what we should be doing.
Yep. All right. And so we'll duplicate.
And then do the same thing for the other one where we're going to give it the port.
Yep.
And then do endpoint property.port.
And then fix whatever I'm doing here. What am I missing?
And then semicolon.
Semicolon?
Oh, at the end, sure. Yeah. That looked like it was.
Yeah, but what's that with reference?
Yeah,
Is you missing a parenthesis somewhere?
That's what we did. This
maybe.
One more paren. Yeah.
Are you sure?
No, hold on.
No, it's
with
not.
Environment.
Yeah, it'd be one more paren.
One more paren.
It's one more paren.
One more paren. Okay. Yep. To close the with environment call.
Right?
Yep.
Yep.
To close the with environment call.
And
then no comma. And then the same on the next thing.
Oh, that's right, because we're missing.
Wait, now it's erroring again.
This is what I don't get. So can we hover over it and see what overload it's resolving, what it's binding to? All right, hang on. Endpoint expression, that's correct.
It's a string.
Candidate
do I miss the string again on this? Hold on.
No, that's what we're trying to avoid.
No string. No,
of course, I just moved all of my stuff.
That's all right.
Has anybody ever done that before? I love it when that happens. How the heck? I can
pick up the output. Well, you've picked the whole thing. Yeah, you've done the whole thing.
I've done the whole thing.
Just minimize it all.
It's like, okay, it's over here. Fine. Just shelve it.
So,
all right.
What is it actually saying it can't resolve?
So it is saying it can't.
Just hover over the diagnostic, the squiggle. Yeah, what does it say? Endpoint reference that can be used to resolve it. Yeah. Argument cannot convert from endpoint reference to string. Wait, but it says it's selecting the overload, right?
So go to what does property return? What type is that?
Endpoint reference.
Endpoint reference expression.
Is there no
reference expression?
Reference expression?
It's reference expression, but that says endpoint reference expression.
Yeah, but endpoint reference expression derives from reference expression. So can you just hover over the with environment method name and make sure that it's actually binding to the right method?
Yeah, sure.
Right. See, it still says there's 8 overloads and it's picking the wrong one. So I still get the sense that we're just doing something wrong. Like, because I'm not driving, it's hard just to tell.
You can also drive for a moment if you want.
Yeah,
let me go
live
share. Live share, it's like, I'm not sure what's going on in the live share. I am.
Can you reshare the link, Sean? And then
sure. You want me to start a new session, a new live share session?
Yeah, let's try that.
Sure. So I'm going to end the live share session here.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and start new live share session. I've got the link here, right? Go ahead and I'll put that in not the public chat, which I almost did.
Oh, I've done that.
As much as I'd love to have everyone collaborating, that's great. But
last week when I almost accidentally did that, I joked that we should do that like as a bit once. We should let everyone join.
Chaos.
All
right.
That would be entertaining.
Connecting.
I see you've joined.
All right, let me have a look. See if I can't figure out.
I'm hands off.
I'm just waiting for the IntelliSense to come in.
Yeah.
I'm not getting any colorization yet. Like it's just
really.
I see David.
I'm getting nothing.
There, but...
Yeah, Oh, there you are.
Like I'm getting no statement, nothing. Like it's not nothing. That just doesn't work at all. It's just like it's a raw text editor, unfortunately.
Oh my god.
Well,
what if you do it in the VS Code live share link? Like you can put that live share link in VS Code.
And I mean, I could try that.
Yeah. I've opened mine in VS Code. It gave me a choice.
Do you get IntelliSense?
No.
Oh, that's not going to help then.
No, I do get. Yeah, it's there.
Oh, you do. But we're not seeing it here. This is what's hard because I can't see what you're seeing. And
no, something weird.
Good try.
I don't know if I have to build it once. No, like I can't build. It's just weird. It's all remote. It's just like it's not streaming it.
Get endpoint. HTTP property. It's the same thing.
I'm on the latest VS preview, so I don't know if something's.
That shouldn't matter.
Yeah, that should be fine.
There.
So am I. I'm running the same preview here, I think.
And I don't see any build here, so like, why is it not working though?
Well,
that's the same thing, and that.
I'm gonna have to like just reproduce this with a completely new app locally because I cannot see, unfortunately, what the error is.
Am I getting IntelliSense?
And F12 doesn't work, so I can't navigate into the source there. Like you'd typically be able to see what API it's picking.
I'm getting like when I hover, I'm getting that, but I'm not getting autocomplete yet.
I'm not getting
in VS Code. I'm in VS Code.
Oh yeah, it just says string value is what was picked when I hover over it, which is not what it should be doing.
No, it's like it's binding to the wrong one. So he's saying, okay, so someone's saying endpoint reference expression is not derived from reference expression, which means that this will never work, but there's a loophole. So what we can do, that's a missing overload. Like that, we need to log that bug. There should be a root environment for endpoint reference expression. We can create a reference expression manually. So what we're going to do is call reference expression.create, and then we're going to pass an interpolated string.
Ooh, this is getting deep now. This is
right.
Yeah, really. This is...
create, and then and then you're going to pass an interpolated. Oh my god, that's IntelliCode trying to help.
Yep, I get that a lot.
Yeah. So we're going to pass an interpolated string.
Okay.
And then inside that interpolated string is where we're going to reference. Yep, you're right, Sean. That's what you want to do. Then put in inpdf.getEndpoint
property host.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, and so we'll do that again for the port. I mean, and at least, it doesn't make sense, but it makes sense. The workaround makes sense.
Yeah,
Why is endpoint reference expression not an overload?
This is my value today. I'm just logging bugs.
That's awesome. This is great.
This is my value. I'm just surfacing bugs, so that's fine.
Right.
I'm not helping fix anything today. I get to be the one who says that doesn't work. No.
Make sure it's already filed somewhere. We've just been ignoring it.
All right, so we've got, but at this point, we have that value. We've got the iron PDF host import, so we should be able to. Now, the next step is to see if I can find anything where we want to, or where we actually are using the PDF functionality just to see it work. I'm willing to trust it as long as I see the config in there. But I'll see if
Damian?
I can find something.
Yeah. What?
You filed this bug a year and a month ago.
Oh my god!
That's the best.
Can you share that? Share the link?
Yeah,
that's amazing. I think we should all go thumb it up. If you're watching this and she shares it, go thumb up that issue.
I just posted it. We should consider introducing a common base type or changing the existing reference expression type to be the common base type of endpoint reference expression, connection string reference, stack output reference, etc.
David Fowler added this to the backlog in January.
It's pretty hilarious. Yeah.
And you said it with such confidence. You're like, yeah, that's a subclass, Pine. Shut up. And I was like,
oh, really? I was so confused now.
Yeah.
Gets my thumbs up. All right.
Why has it started failing all of a sudden?
That is interesting. Let's see. Let's check that out.
This is like the first error we hit after that, or the second error we hit in the whole stream.
Exactly.
Right?
So I'm going to assume I've done something.
Did we
wrong
delete?
right
Did
here,
you
so
accidentally delete? You deleted a line you didn't mean to.
Probably.
You deleted
Most
the seek
likely.
line.
Did
So
I really?
it'll be in
On
your
the Steep line?
diff, right? Go into your Git diff.
Yeah, I am here. Or sorry.
Okay, sorry, we can't see.
No, it's fine. No, it's help if I think so.
That's right. Multi-money.
Down the bottom on the left, line 18. You deleted.
Yep.
Nice.
Good catch.
Well
Good
executed.
catch.
Good use of Git. Good use of source control, my friends.
Dang.
Expert.
There we go. All right, now, of course there we go. All right.
So just to like underline what we just did there, because it was a bit of a journey,
Yeah.
like, and why I was confused and what the difference is here. So we're actually, if you zoom out a little bit, just so we can see more of this code, like horizontally, if that's okay. Okay, so yeah, we go. All right, so line 23, we're setting the environment variable by passing a callback on line 23, and then that callback runs later. We run that after everything has had their endpoints allocated. That's just kind of the contract. And so it's safe to just go resource.primaryendpoint.host. That's kind of an unusual pattern. We usually wouldn't promote doing it that way, all right? But that does work just because of the timing. Then on line 26, we do it a different way. We kind of do the same thing, but then we have to call toString because port isn't a string and the environment overload that we're using requires a string. So that's why it looks a little bit different. But the way that we usually intend this to work is either line 32, where you're just saying get endpoint and you pass the entire endpoint reference. If you actually hover over get endpoint, the return type of get endpoint is not an endpoint, it's an endpoint reference. It's a promise for an endpoint at some point in the future. And then when we see that value, we defer evaluating that until the same time that we run the callbacks on line 23 and line 26. And then line 29 and line 31, we're doing something similar, but instead of passing the entire endpoint reference, we're creating a custom reference expression, which is also deferred. And so that will not be evaluated until after endpoints are available. So there are like 3 different patterns going on here to achieve effectively the same result. And I just wanted to make sure that people understand why. If we had just done what we tried to do initially, which is set the environment variable this name to this value and tried to get the endpoint value when that code was run, it would have thrown an exception.
Would have been null, right? Yeah.
It has to be deferred. There is a usability thing here. The fact that we had to like talk about this so much, there's obviously a missing API here or a few things, but I just wanted to make sure that that was clear why we had to do all these various things. At the end of all this, what I would do is rewrite line 23 and line 26 to match line 29 and line 31. So use reference expressions everywhere to defer to things that you want to be evaluated later, rather than doing it doesn't matter. Just use one over the other, I guess. Like pick one and use it consistently and then understand what's happening.
Excellent. And so I think at this point I was looking through, I don't think I have any that just exercises the PDF functionality in terms of like an end-to-end endpoint on this. So I don't know that we'll be able to show the magic on that. Okay. I'm trying to see if I can find I have to find one of our carriers that needs to do a PDF conversion of some kind. So let me see if I can I have all of my stuff on the wrong side here. This is gonna.
There's like a reset window.
There is the reset windows thing.
Let's. I'm willing to do that at this point.
Reset windows layout. It's like a third of the way down.
There we go. Thank you.
Ask me how I know.
Reopen output and all that sort of stuff, but that's fine.
Shocker! I've done this about 8 million times.
So then if you go to the view menu and say drop down view, output is like, so like errors and output, the error list and output are the first 2 that I usually turn on.
There you go.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense. Okay.
Yep, there you go.
All right, great.
And then dock them however you usually have them.
Well, that as long as it's sticking to the bottom of my screen. Thank you. Honestly, just remembering how to reset the window is helpful, so thanks.
Yeah.
All right, so then let's go ahead. So we've proven that we should start up. We should see the config settings get set.
Yeah, we should see it all flow through. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, we'll check that.
So while you're doing this, I'm curious. I want to ask you like a very direct question here, Sean.
Uh-oh.
How do you feel about the flexibility of writing C# code to do what you were doing before in a Docker file?
I think for me, I've gotten so used to doing the Docker file that doing it in C# is not necessarily an advantage. But the big advantage for me here, though, is it being centralized. It's right here. It's accessible. And I will say that I think there's definite. I haven't gotten to play with it enough to feel the impact of it yet, but I get the strong sense that there are advantages in being able to have things like the IntelliSense. And once I understand the concepts around the reference expressions and things like that, it's with those building blocks, I can see the constructing of containers and setting this up getting much easier. So I do think there's a lot of value in that kind of IntelliSense and the strongly typed nature of stuff. At the moment, I'm kind of like, well, I know how to do it in Docker Compose and I know how that works. So it's like it's the devil I know, right? But I think that this is a really nice, I can see the advantage of having a strongly typed approach to doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
A less direct answer to your direct question.
No, that's good. That's good.
So we've got here then, let's check out our CIP API and click that. So we should see here our Iron PDF host is now correct. Iron PDF license key is there. Iron PDF port is correct. So it's all there.
And the Iron PDF container looks like it started. Should have some logs in it now.
Yep, it started, and I'll use your handy console log link there.
There we go.
All right, yep, it is started. It's running. It's got all the things it needs to do. Now, I'm willing to, given that the settings and the config are all there, I'm willing to believe it would do what it needed to do when we access this. So I'm considering that a check mark. That's fine.
Sweet.
Nice.
That's pretty awesome.
So, David, you mentioned let's show wait for as well. So at the moment, all these resources just start up in parallel, even though some of them you've expressed as depending on other ones. So what you can do.
I'm sorry. Before we start there, Damian, the one thing we didn't get to talk about the lifetime, and so here you can see the Iron PDF is still running, right? So it shut down the Aspire, but we've got that up and running, which is great because it really is the restart of that container. It's a pretty heavyweight container, so it's really nice to have that available. So sorry, back to you. Let's talk.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Good call out.
Good, fantastic call out. So now you can also basically instruct the project here, CIP API, that it needs to wait for any other resource before it starts. Now, very similar to Docker Compose, you can say depends on, and it'll do that for you. So if you want to, just like anyway, at the end there, after chain another call, it'll be with, dot wait for.
Yeah, wait for.
Dot wait for, and then just pass in Iron PDF, pass the variable in directly.
Very nice.
And as simple as that. So now
is it multiple wait for calls if I have an array of things?
If you want multiple of the so wait for Redis. Yep. And then now if we hit F5 and you show us the dashboard as quick as you can, if you wouldn't mind, so people
do my best.
Can see it.
One of the things that was interesting is it's not popping up a window necessarily. There we go. Trying.
So now we see stuff waiting. So we see it's waiting.
It's waiting for a sec, And
now it's starting once the other stuff is healthy. So that's actually another interesting segue. You may have seen the color of some of those be yellow and then go green.
Yeah, the health checks.
And that's because of health checks. So we can you're already using health checks in your API. I saw that. So let's tell the model about your health check because we don't know that you have a health check endpoint. So after wait for or before wait for, you can type with HTTP health check and tell us the path that your health check endpoint is on.
First, I have to know the path.
Well, if you
think I saw it was health,
I can tell you. But yeah.
Check. Add health checks. Let's see. We've got.
It'll be a map health check.
Thank you.
Health Z.
Health Z here. Yeah, there's one that requires auth, and then there's one here. So okay.
Yep.
All right. So it'll be health here.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're using a combination of the old health check middleware and the newer endpoint.
This is definitely a spot that needs some love that I have not touched in a while. This was one of those things where it's like, it works enough. I can go there and get it. And I backed away slowly.
So pick whichever one you want. Health, you can have both if you like, health and health Z. It's fine.
Let's do health because I think health Z requires the authorization, so we'll do.
Okay.
Do I have to add the
slash? Yep. And then if we run it again,
all right, let's do it.
The status of that should be reflected in the dashboard.
All right. Now, there's dashboard is loading. It keeps loading on my other browser.
Yeah, it keeps on the primary monitor.
Oh, and I just thought about this too.
So it's unhealthy at this point, and
so we can click on.
Oh, maybe it's just always unhealthy. That's also there we go.
Now it's running. Yeah.
So it just took. So I'm assuming your health check.
And in fact, our health check makes sure that it can contact Redis and that it can contact Sync.
There you go.
We are.
Nice. Well, And the other thing is too, from the dashboard, you can actually, there's commands in here. So you can restart or stop or start individual resources, right?
So details or the logs or of course Copilot.
Okay.
And then I can stop them and stuff.
I want you, Sean, are you signed into GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio?
I am, I believe, yes.
Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't show up there.
Dashboard, top right-hand corner of the dashboard, see the GitHub Copilot icon, very up.
Yes.
Click on that for me. And then just click on Summarize Resources. And so one of the things that we added in Aspire 9.3 was GitHub Copilot integration in the dashboard. And what makes this special, other than just a normal, GitHub Copilot chat session, is we default set it up with the context of everything you can see in the dashboard. So it knows about all your resources, all the config, all the logs, all the traces. Because you're not sending traces to the dashboard right now, it can't see those, but it can see all your structured logs, but it can see your console logs and your metrics. And so if you did have errors, you can ask it to diagnose an error for you, for example. Or you can ask it very esoteric things like, how is my CIP API getting the address or talking to my Redis? How is it using it? Or I've even asked it just things like, why is my application using Redis? And then what it will do is if you've got logs, it will look at that and go, oh, well, it looks like it's using it for caching. And like this call here called it, did stuff like that for you. So.
Interesting. Now you mentioned, does it has access to the containers logs as well or no?
It does.
So let's just for an experiment then go ahead and say, if I've got this, if there was an error there. Oh, maybe it's been a minute here.
Sorry, failed.
I'm just, this is just
if you go to structured, do we get structured logs for this?
These are console logs, I think, right? I'm not. Yeah, this isn't from our app. So let's see.
It's possible. In order for structured logs to be captured from a container, the container would have to be sending OTel to the gRPC endpoint on the dashboard, but then you would hit the issue that you love so much, Maddy, which we're in the process of fixing right now, which is the TLS set would be wrong. Here we go. Perfect. So you're going to ask it about why is it complaining about GPU acceleration?
Just because I'm curious about it, right? Let's see.
Yeah.
Video acceleration is Linux API, right? It's running this image, which is a PDF process. It's not a video processing tool. Thanks, Copilot. Let's see. So I mean, it's likely it's a starting point in this case, which is fine because.
So if you look at the summary, those bullet points in the summary are like spot on.
Yeah,
the containerized environment does not provide access to the video provider. So that is correct.
Yeah, there you go.
So what you would love to do at this point is say, how do I fix this? It says, see the suggested questions. What steps can I take to enable video acceleration? Click on that. Now, I don't know if it knows about the Aspire API.
Right.
I don't think it does yet, right? It's for it's 4.1.
But what's that?
It's 4.1.
But ensure host support, explore
But what's interesting is that it looks like maybe, I don't know if this container is set up by default to just use the GPU if it is exposed to it, or whether you have to like manually configure it with a Docker file and stuff.
It looks like you have to specify, well, according to Copilot, it looks like you have to do something around specifying the devices. So either way, I'd say I'm further, but you know what? I'm further to understanding it than I was at the start. And that's typically, I call that a win for an AI tool. It gets me further than I was on my own.
Right,
I'm okay with
perfect. So I thought that was worth showing anyway, that's in there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
No, that's great. I didn't know that it had access to all of that context. So that's really helpful. I think that's a worthwhile call out, I think, from like an onboarding perspective, because I would not assume that it had that context. And the fact that it does is very powerful.
Yeah. So like you were saying that, it being strongly typed in C# because you've already done the work of setting up all your Docker stuff, right? That's not a huge benefit for you. And because you guys have logging and OTel, the service default isn't a huge benefit to you. It cleans things up. But
the time I took to do this from scratch is where I would have absolutely appreciated it. To be clear, I think that setup originally, when I first started this effort, I had Docker experience, but just background for everybody. We're running currently 3 different products in the SAP BTP cloud. We've done that all in the past year and a half with a team of 5, right? And so we've been really hauling on this, but we've been picking up a ton of stuff. And when we first started down this journey, we didn't have a lot of experience with Kubernetes. We didn't have a lot of experience with Terraform. We didn't have a lot of experience with all of these things. And so it did. The initial getting going with this did take a chunk of time to understand how we wanted all those containers and resources to play together. And I do think that had I had Aspire been in the world to the extent that it was pretty hot off the presses at that time.
Yeah.
But had it been as mature as it is now, I can see it having saved me a lot of time at that spot, and I would have been very appreciative of it.
So yeah, what's cool is like even now you'll still get Copilot, the dashboard for just clicking and looking at things, right, and all the logs in one place. Like that alone might be enough for it to be worth Aspirifying for you. With even though everything else already works.
And with more work, as you pointed out, like a lot of that manual code you're writing to hook up client integrations today could become one line of code if you adopted the Aspire configuration conventions instead. Obviously, that would have impact about how you have to set keys for your deployments and stuff, or set other config values. But you can also do a halfway. Like you can use our integration, but then configure the integration using the keys that you want. And you could also, going back to what I said about launch profiles early on, you could have both. Like if you've got multiple devs, and sometimes you want, and like some people like running with Aspire locally, but other people like running with Docker Compose, you could have an Aspire launch profile for every one of these projects. There's only one here. And then you could configure it to set an environment variable that your code then reads that says, oh, I'm in like run in Aspire mode. Let me configure OTel this way instead of configuring it this other way to go to Seek, for example. So like you can have full flexibility just by using the standard primitives you have already, like launch profiles and config values. And like, it's really not that magical. There's no code dependency between your app host project and any of your .NET projects. There's actually no assembly reference that goes across that line. Everything that happens there is just setting environment variables. Well, that's really it. That's all it's doing. And it's
saving. I mean, we hadn't really talked about this, but when we first started the live stream too, we were talking about the fact that, prior to this, I was really building this as the Docker container, right? And we were going through all that. And my thought at the start of this live stream was, I don't know if I want to give that up, because I don't know if I wanted to diverge that much. But at this point, I feel very comfortable with it, because I feel like I understand, one, there's no magic. I understand what's happening. I understand what I'm going to need to apply at production time versus dev loop time. And I feel like the startup time, like you said, I mean, massively better. I mean, because of course you're not, I mean, the tooling, I was doing it for consistency before. We were kind of enforcing it, where we said, okay, we want it to be consistent, so we want to load the same container here that we're going to run there. But given the maturity of our application now, I mean, this is a big benefit to be able to start up and be running in 10 seconds and have have just enough of the containerized environment that you need for your dev loop. It's that concept of like just enough of the dev loop is really, really powerful.
Yeah. And it's debugging natively now too. So the debugger's gonna be a little bit faster, like all those things just gonna be. And then what's cool now is someone could open this in a code space and hit F5 on the app host, and it would all just work.
That is beautiful.
Just magic.
So I think, at this point, like, I'm happy. I'm going to go through the list. But I think we cut it. I think we're there. I think we've got the IMPDF, we've got Seek, we've got the metrics, we've got Redis and the caching and Redis Insights, we've got
data volumes,
we've got its weighting on stuff, and I mean
raw containers.
The fact that we were able, I will say, I'm impressed. The fact that we were able to work through that start to finish in a little over 2 hours and accomplish what took me, I'm sure, days initially, right? is between the troubleshooting and the startup and the waiting. I mean, the ability to have this ready to go is, I mean, that's fantastic. So I think it's been,
that's awesome.
I'm really glad I came into this not knowing, because you get to see my joy as I find out all the ways that it's going to help us. So no, this was
awesome.
A very great experience, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being willing to share like real source and everything too. Like I said at the beginning, for those of you who joined late, we're not going to share the actual source code, but Sean was showing the production app they run. I mean, he was.
If you want, since we did it in Git and I've got it in a branch, I can probably show the diff somewhere if you want.
Yeah, you could show the app host at least, right?
Yeah, you can see the app host. Yeah,
because the user secrets are all protected, so it's good. But just to recap real quick for all of you watching this with Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever, like Sean had only heard of Aspire, kind of knew what it was. He actually gave us a pretty good definition of it, so you know more than you let on, but hadn't actually started trying to Aspirify something yet. And that was at 2 p.m. Eastern or so. And we just poked through and we Aspirified I assume this is the most of the workflow of the app. I'm sure
most of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And now it just works. And so in a world where this was like we had someone else on your team on the call or something, honestly, you should do it after and blue sky out if it works. Like have someone clone the Aspirify branch and just hit F5 and see if it works.
Yeah.
Because that's like the super extra cool magic. That was fun. That was fun. Not again, not a disaster. We're doing pretty good.
I might build a new app just so I can say, let's do this again sometime.
Nice.
Yeah, 100%. I'm down. But yeah.
Maddy, do we want others to come on and do this too from the community? Is that the idea?
Yes.
Yeah, we have a bit of a backlog, right?
Yeah, we're actually booked out, I think, through July now.
Nice.
Which is crazy. I'm very excited. And all different things. So next week, I think we have Ed, Dutch Ed. I don't know how to say his last name, so he's Dutch. He's very tall. He already has an Aspirified app, but he wants to rip out some stuff and use emulators instead of our provisioning stuff. So that's going to be a cool example of like updating an Aspire app. And then I believe Jerry, Nixon, and Tommaso are going to come on and talk about like, I don't know, sequels, something. Where is it?
SQL Builder?
It probably is SQL Builder. Yeah. Data API Builder.
Yeah. Okay.
And Aspirifying that. We have a bunch. I'll try to post these as we put them in the system to schedule them, but we're still kind of winging it. And Sean, you were our first guest, and this will go down as history as the first ever.
I'm honored. I appreciate it. I clicked that calendar link as fast as I could. So no, I'm happy to be here. But no, thanks for taking me through it. And it's always, whenever you're going through a new technology like this, it's always daunting to go through it yourself. So I had the benefit of having 3 pros, right? So I got a lot out of it too. So really appreciate all of the learning and the time you took.
Yeah, thank you. That was fun. All right, 100 people for 2 hours is not bad. Not too shabby. So
without the pull of a distinguished engineer either.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry, I downgraded you guys' numbers.
I'm gonna harbor that against it.
Yeah. 100%. We'll see how the replay does. But sweet. Thanks everybody. Thank you, Sean. Everybody. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks. You too. Thanks, Pine. Thanks, Damian. See you guys next week.
Catch you later.
Right, take care. Bye.